are broadcasting live from the E&B Granite Studios at the Centene Community Ice Center on 101 ESPN. E&B Granite, Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
Amazing stopper. The U.S. has utilized that high flip several times today. The Canadian defense has had trouble fielding it. There's Matthews, two grade A golden opportunities in overtime that Binnington has stopped. One the blocker, one the right pad, and then Brady Tkachuk. What an amazing stop. Crucial, critical, timely. Jordan Binnington. That's one of the game's best goal scorers, 3 feet away. Pass McDavid scores! Connor McDavid wins it for Canada! And Jordan Binnington has done it again inside the TD Garden.
That's what it sounded like last night on ESPN alongside Alex and T-Bone. I'm BK. We're broadcasting live at the E&B Granite Studios out at the Centene Community Ice Center as Team Canada wins it in the Four Nations face-off. They go to overtime because how else could this thing have come to an end? Of course it had to come into overtime, and it was Connor McDavid who was sitting on the doorstep with nobody anywhere near him.
He had a sandwich before he even shot the puck.
Putting the puck in the back of the net, finding a way to win it for Team Canada. But it doesn't get there, Alex, if not for what Jordan Binnington did in that overtime and the third period, to be fair. Jordan Binnington came under a lot of criticism leading into that game last night, whether it was Canada fans saying, I don't even want this guy on the roster, much less in the starters net. And then the whole conversation about how Canada just doesn't have any good goalies. And so by default, we've got to go to this guy in Jordan Binnington. At least, 6 years ago, he had a really good Game 7. So we'll go to that guy. And last night you saw why. Stopped 20 shots in a row. 2 more goals saved than expected last night, according to the super nerdy numbers. 31 total saves, and in overtime, the guy was the best player on the ice. Alex, what'd you make of it last night? The aura of Binnington reignited in Boston.
I mean, that was the legacy standard, and that's what we talked about going into the game. This was going to be a legacy-defining moment for Jordan Binnington. The amount of tweets last night, I was having somewhat of a field day in terms of just reading them, and I really wanted to kind of hate retweet to be like, oh, yeah, suck it, Canada, but they won, so I really couldn't. But the amount of tweets that I saw of Jordan Binnington shouldn't have been a part of this Team Canada Four Nations tournament, and then they were quote tweeting it saying Jordan Binnington was the best goaltender in this tournament. And I don't know if I would say he was the best goaltender because Connor Hellebuyck was incredible in that first period for Team USA. But if you look at the saves above expected and the high danger saves for Jordan Binnington in that tournament, because of how he performed in that championship game last night, he was neck and neck with Connor Hellebuyck throughout the tournament. So Jordan Binnington, to me, just ended all of the questions surrounding what he is as a goaltender. Is he a regular season goaltender? No, he's inconsistent. And I can say that. I can accept that because I fought back for it a long time. Although I think the team in front of him hasn't been the greatest, but it's fine. But he is also a big game goaltender. And to me, if you give me 2 options, you're going to have 10 years of a guy who is going to be one of the best in the regular season, multiple Vezina trophies, but chokes in the playoffs, or a guy that's going to, when he gets to an elimination game, come up with the biggest saves for you and win you a cup, maybe 2. I'm taking the latter every single day of the week.
Saw this on Twitter last night in winner-take-all games. Here's what he has done. 2019, second round, Game 7 against Dallas. 29 saves on 30 shots. They end up getting the W. In the 2019 Stanley Cup Final, Game 7 against Boston. 32 saves on 33 shots. The Blues win the cup as a result. And then last night in the Four Nations face-off final, 31 saves on 33 shots, and Team Canada is able to get the victory. 3-0 in winner-take-all games. The dude comes up with his biggest possible moments when the moments are the biggest. I'm with you, Alex. I've said this all along. I think Jordan Binnington is an average regular season goaltender. He is if you were looking at, okay, what is the bar to clear if you are an above-average regular season goalie? In my opinion, it is literally Jordan Binnington. He is that prime meridian for goaltenders in the NHL. But if you were telling me, hey, you can go with one of the top 10 goalies in the NHL or Jordan Binnington when you get to those big moments in the postseason, I'm taking Binner. And so if you are a contender, this is the guy that I want in net. It just makes it a little difficult when you're in the spot where the Blues are at right now, where no, he's not going to be Andrei Vasilevsky at times during the regular season. He's not going to go out there and post a 920 save percentage every season. That's not who Binnington is. There are moments throughout the course of the regular season that you'd want something better in net. And again, I'm saying this as no disrespect to Binner. This is actually, in my opinion, more valuable, because the most valuable thing that you can have in this sport is a guy in net that you know can help you win a cup. It just makes it that much more. It's incumbent on the team and the management and the players around him to get him to that place, so that way his value is able to be extracted in the best way possible. Team Canada was able to do that last night.
Yeah, and I 100% agree with that. It's hard to put a value on him for a team like the Blues in a retool. I know we talked about this last year. Last year he had a great regular season, but it's hard to put a value on him on this team because they don't get the peaks that you're talking about of getting to the playoffs and getting a chance to see him. I mean, those numbers you read off for his winner-take-all games, guys, that's a .958 save percentage. That's a 1.33 goals against average.
Jeez.
That's insane.
And those are against the best teams that you could face.
And high-danger shots.
USA. It's crazy.
It's unbelievable. And you're right. He's a goalie. You go into a playoff series, you want that guy on your team, but it makes it hard to really not value him, but it makes it really hard when you watch him in the regular season for the Blues because they can't get that moment from him. And when they have gotten to the playoffs, they've seen it. You look at that 19 Cup run. We talk about it all the time, that team that had the, 9 20-goal scorers, and he gets hurt in that Colorado series. He almost stole that series from them in a series in which they had no business of really being in. They were a good team. Colorado was a better team, and Binnington kept them alive for most of that series until he got hurt. So he solidified himself last night, to me, as the guy that you want when it comes to winner-take-all game. And no matter what in the NHL, don't care who the best goalie is, Vasilevsky, Hellebuck, don't care. Binnington just solidified he's that guy.
He's Jimmy Butler. He's Robert Horry. He's Justin Williams. He's Eli Manning. He's Jock Peterson. He's Kike Hernandez. These guys are fine players during the regular season. They're nice to have on your team, but once you get to the playoffs, they're the guy that you want in the lineup.
So I was looking at this because the narrative, because I know a lot of people push back on the playoffs and say, yeah, but guys, he's only got a 906 playoff save percentage. So isolate that Vancouver series in the bubble, because we all know that bubble was a nightmare. That's where he played awful. It was a 750 save percentage in 3 games. Take those three.
Sound like him.
Take those 3 games out of it, and then look at his playoff. It's a 927 save percentage. So in the playoffs, since he entered the league, these are the goaltenders that have played the same amount or more games than him and have a better save percentage. Carey Price, Igor Shesterkin, and that's it. Andrei Vasilevsky is below him. So he has 2 goaltenders that have played the same amount of games, if not more than him, in the postseason. And yes, the bubble was part of the playoffs, but we all know that was a disaster. 2020 felt like it never happened. But other than that, he is one of the best goaltenders in the playoffs since the 2018-2019 season.
Also, couldn't we be honest about the bubble? It didn't feel big.
No.
Part of why
I
think he struggled is because it didn't have the same feel. What leads to Binner having these moments is the crowd being at its apex. It's him being able to lock in when everything around him is in complete chaos. Last night, one of the things that stood out to me, Alex, about watching these 2 games between USA and Canada is just the speed of the game. Everything is moving so fast, and it requires you mentally to be able to process it and slow it down for you. And for a lot of games, or a lot of players in those moments, everything speeds up to a place where they just kind of get lost. You know who I felt like got lost in that game last night? Was Mitch Marner. He was kind of nowhere to be found for most of the game. And this was the case for most of him in the tournament,
well, that's
to be
the
frank.
playoffs for Mitch Marner, too.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes me wonder, I don't know if that guy is the player that I would be interested in. Mikko Rantanen had a kind of weird Four Nations face-off as well, and it's been a weird transition for him to Carolina.
It was really a 3 Nations tournament. Finland didn't really compete.
For sure, but there are some players that get into these moments, and it's why I think it's valuable for teams that are in the retool to get to the playoffs to find out who can live up to these moments. It was valuable to see Tyler O'Neill struggle the way that he did in the postseason to find out, okay, well, it's a small sample size, but that didn't look the part of a playoff performer. Arenado hasn't looked the part of a playoff performer. Same thing is true most of the time for Paul Goldschmidt. So it's the opposite for Jordan Binnington. He's one of those guys that finds a way to slow down the game, and yes, there is a human element. You guys know I'm the biggest nerd possible, but there is a human element to this where in those big moments, there's a lot of dudes that go to the bathroom before the game, throw up real quick, and can never slow it down from there.
Yeah.
Bennington's the opposite.
Yeah.
He's a guy that he lives for those exact moments.
Yeah, Glenn Hall was that way. Glenn Hall, for people that don't know, the expansion team for the Blues, he used to vomit before every single game. That was the only way he would prepare for it. And it's like, man, could you imagine having to deal with that? Get puke on your chin, and it's like, I didn't get rid of it.
Oh, man.
Nasty.
Somebody else on the text line said Mad Bum. That's the other example of this. That's a good one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Madison Bumgarner's a great example. He was pretty average throughout the course of his regular season career. And then you get him into the postseason, and he's regular season Clayton Kershaw.
And just like Benner, Mad Bum, because of that postseason, has a fairly good argument to be a Hall of Famer. I don't think he will get in because baseball's different from hockey because they don't just look at, we've talked about, they don't just look at your NHL career. They look at your whole
professional
hockey resume. But it's kind of the same thing with Jordan Binnington, right? Like if you just took his NHL regular season numbers, I don't know if he is a he's not a Hall of Famer.
No, he's average.
His regular season. But then you start to look at, hey, this guy led the Blues to a Stanley Cup championship. He always performed in the playoffs. He's now won a gold medal with Team Canada. Could potentially get the gold at the Olympics. Like, that is a resume for a Hall of Famer. Even though the numbers, if you just look at them on, like, Hockey Reference, don't look that great, that guy looks like a Hall of Famer when you start to really dig into that resume. Just like the same argument could be said about Mad Bum.
It's why it felt so satisfying watching him have that success and watching the amount of people on social media say, like, oh, Jordan Binnington, he's the big-time goaltender. Look at him, what he's done. It's impressive. Caught me by surprise. It's because the narrative around him, unfortunately, that this team took a turn in the opposite direction because COVID / them moving on and making some questionable decisions with their roster, they could still be in that competitive window. But because they turned a different direction, it does feel like you're not maximizing the amount of years that you have in terms of Jordan Binnington, and it's why people keep bringing up the trade narrative with Jordan Binnington.
To get to this.
But I hate it, BK. Like, not that I hate it because I love Jordan Binnington, but I hate it because it doesn't make any sense. The narrative of, you got to trade Jordan Binnington now. Look, his stock is as high as it can be. Go out there and get something in return. We've talked about this. Show me a return for a goaltender in the past NHL that's in the middle of the season that you've said, oh, damn, the team that traded him away got a better return. Because it's not out there. Roberto Luongo was traded in the offseason from Florida to Vancouver when I think he was 30 years old. They got Todd Bertuzzi back, who was 32 years old. Like, Patrick Waugh had demanded a trade out of Montreal. It's how he got sent to Colorado. Logan Thompson, who has been incredible for Washington this year. You know what he got this offseason? 2 third-round draft picks. So to sit there and say, well, you got to trade Jordan Binnington when his stock is high, what's more valuable to this Blues team going into next season? A third-round draft pick, which you probably get for him, or Binnington in between the pipes for you for the next 2 years?
Who's the team? Like, setting that aside.
Probably Carolina.
Alex.
Carolina would be the team that needs to trade for him because they have injuries all the time and they want to win a cup.
Okay. So we've got one team that's in the bidding war for Jordan Binnington's services. One?
Maybe Toronto, too. I mean, if you're Craig Berube, you'd say, give me that guy because that's how we win. So
maybe 2. At most, you've got, like, potentially 2 teams that are in contention right now that are in need of a goalie. And again, this is at most. Because I'm looking around. Florida, nope. Tampa, nope. Washington, nope. They like their guy. New Jersey just paid a guy this offseason. Winnipeg, Dallas, Minnesota, no. Edmonton likes their guy for better or for worse. Vegas, nope. LA, don't think so. Vancouver, nope. There's just not teams around the NHL right now that are in contention that have that clear need for a goaltender that would be interested in giving you whatever it possibly could take to get Jordan Binnington. So even if I was in favor of trading Benner, and I think there's at least a conversation to be had there. I would not be in favor of it, but there's a conversation to be had if you were blown away. It is effectively the same conversation that we're already having with Braden Shin.
Yeah. Hey,
this guy's getting up there a little bit. You don't know how much longer he's going to have. By the time you're good again and getting into the games where he is at his apex, is he still going to be in that mode where he can deliver the goods? I don't know the answer to that question, and so I'd be probably more open to it than you are, Alex. But that team's not out there that's going to be desperate to go make that move for Jordan Binnington. And when there's no desperation for him, I don't think you're going to get the offer that would incentivize me, if I'm in Doug Armstrong's shoes, to go make that move.
And the Air Comfort Service text line brought up Ryan Miller. It's a different scenario for me, but it is correct. This is a pending UFA, Ryan Miller was, and he was playing really good at the time. But you know what they got in return? Buffalo did? They got Yaroslav Halak, who was a 31-year-old goaltender at the time. Chris Stewart, who was an underperforming NHL player at the time for the Blues, a prospect in William Carrier, who was a fourth-line player, and then they got a first-round draft pick that resulted in the 25th overall draft pick. Would you trade for two NHL players who were underperforming and up there in age, a prospect that was barely at the AHL level, and a 25th overall draft pick for Jordan Binnington? That doesn't make my team better next year.
The other one that you could point to is the Markstrom trade, which recently took place in the NHL as well. It's the most recent example of this, and it was Kevin Ball, who's a 24-year-old big defenseman who plays on the blue line for Calgary. He's like a second pair guy for them. He's only 24 years old, so a really nice addition for them. And then they got a first-round pick in return. So that's the kind of thing that we're talking about, is you're getting a future asset that you're hoping ends up cashing in for you and a first-round pick.
And going back to Jamie's narrative,
scenario.
And the one that we argued about, Jamie saying, like, if you trade Braden Shen, then you're in a full rebuild. I disagreed with that. If you trade Jordan Binnington, you're closer to a rebuild in that sense.
I just don't think it makes sense for this team. If you got an offer that blows you away,
Totally.
I'm willing to discuss it, but I just don't see that as being anything that is realistic. We'll talk this over with our goalie expert. That is Mike McKenna, coming up in about 15 minutes or so. Mike joins us each and every Friday here on the show. He's going to break down what he saw from Benner last night and what makes Benner so special in those big moments. So stay tuned for that. That's in 15 minutes. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Ask Us Anything. That's coming up at the end of this hour. But coming up next, we got some new details earlier today, boys, on the Nolan Arenado trade conversations from this past offseason. The fifth team that was on his trade list has now been announced. We know who that was. And I got to ask you the question. How do you now feel about the Cardinals offseason now that all of the cards are on the table? Talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
Live from the Centene Community Ice Center inside the E&B Granite Studios, this is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. E&B Granite, Bernie Fedurko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
All right, Alex, all the cards are on the table now. Katie Wu had a great piece earlier today over on The Athletic, and this quote tells me everything that I needed to know about Arenado's priorities in the offseason. Quote, according to an industry source, multiple teams inquired about Arenado early in the offseason. That list includes the Detroit Tigers, the Kansas City Royals, and the Los Angeles Angels.
All right, he's going to go.
Those conversations did not yield much, as all three teams were considered non-starters for Arenado.
I was told the Angels.
She then continues later in the story. To help Mozeliak's search, Arenado presented him with a list of 5 teams that he would consider waiving his no-trade clause for. According to multiple league sources, that list named included the Dodgers, the Red Sox, the Yankees, the Padres, the 4 teams that we had already known, and the Houston Astros. It has now been revealed the mystery team, the mystery 5th team that was a part of his list was the Houston Astros.
You have a box, mystery box, or a boat. The mystery box could be anything. It could be a boat.
And it was indeed a boat.
It was a boat.
So, one of the 5 teams that was on Nolan Arenado's trade list is the team that John Mozeliak was able to get a deal done with. Unfortunately for Mo, that deal was completed about 48 hours after the Houston Astros announced that they were trading Kyle Tucker to the Chicago Cubs. That was enough to spook Nolan Arenado into believing, despite then trading for Nolan Arenado, whatever, that maybe the Astros were taking a step back. They weren't going to be as good any longer because they were losing Kyle Tucker. They were losing Alex Bregman and inserting Nolan Arenado. But I digress.
Calm down, man.
And he said, nope. He apparently, and there were some really great details in this story. You should check it all out over on The Athletic. But according to Katie's story, he wanted to take his time on making this decision. So he did so through a weekend. And then by Monday, the two sides were like, hey, Nolan, what do you want to do? And he's like, give me a little bit more time. And by Tuesday, he's like, no, I'm not going to Houston. I might be willing to do it later in the offseason as I see what you decide to do here, Houston, but I'm not going right now. And then Houston was like, cool, we'll go sign Christian Walker.
And I think got the better player.
Yeah.
And they're like, we filled the position that we actually needed to fill, first base.
Alex, when I read this, my takeaway, especially from the new notes in here of, hey, Houston was one of the teams, and more notably, Detroit, Kansas City, and the Angels were all interested in Arenado, and Arenado flat out said no, not interested in going there. It tells me that our read on this a week ago or so, I guess now, was correct. Nolan Arenado's cool with being here in St. Louis, man. He'd prefer to be with the Dodgers. He'd prefer to be with the Yankees. He'd prefer to be with the Padres. He'd prefer to be with the Red Sox.
He'd prefer to be with the Astros, just with Kyle Tucker on the team.
Correct. But the version of the Astros that exists today, I'm good. So basically, he told the Cardinals, if you want to send me to a team that legitimately has World Series aspirations, I don't have to squint. It's very clear to everybody in the baseball community, this team is striving for a World Series now. Yeah, I'll go. That's cool. Find me a deal to one of those 4 teams, basically, in Major League Baseball. Otherwise, nah, man. I'm chilling. I'll be at Jupiter for camp. I'll be in St. Louis with my 2-year-old that I'm happy and comfortable raising in St. Louis. My family has been started now. I'm not even going back home for that crap bleep team out in L.A. I'm not going to the Angels. The Angels I'm not even willing to accept a trade to. That, to me, is noteworthy and meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
I think that this, now that we've seen all of this on the table, got blown out of proportion from Arenado's side. I think it's very clear the Cardinals would love to get him off the roster. I think Arenado's going to be fine inside of that clubhouse, man. He had every opportunity to leave this offseason, and he said no.
It's kind of why I'm rooting for him, which I know kind of seems odd because I don't know if the team's going to be good, and he's obviously, at least last year, looked like he was in decline, but the guy did it the right way. To me, Nolan Arenado, with that 5-team list now that we know, he said, I either won a World Series or I'm staying where I'm at.
Yeah.
And I amend him for that. That's the way you're supposed to approach it. I'm not going to just go get traded somewhere. And I think in the piece for Katie, it said he wasn't going to uproot his life to go somewhere with his 2-year-old kid to get them satisfied there and then potentially uproot his life again.
Bingo.
I'm going to stay where I'm at. It's the same thing that Torrey Krug did and why he vetoed the Philadelphia Flyers. But for me, the one thing I thought of was man, we've been calling this an off-season failure by the Cardinals. I don't know if I could call it a failure anymore. I don't know if I could call it a success either. So I don't know.
Definitely not a success.
I don't know what word I'm looking for, but it's that, because they had success in trading him. The trade was done. And Nolan Arenado, which said, no, I'm not going to go to where you told me you were going to trade me. And Mo's going to be like, well, I don't know what the hell I'm supposed to do then, because I got one of the 5 teams you wanted, and you said no. To me, it's not a successful offseason because you didn't do priority 1, 2, and 3, as John Mozeliak said. But I'm not going to say that you failed this offseason, because you tried, you accomplished it, the player just nixed it. And I can't blame the player for it either. So I'm curious what the season's going to look like. And again, I'm kind of rooting for Nolan Arenado, because I understand kind of in the situation he's in, to where you're a guy that has a young family and you're not just going to move just to say that I moved.
I'll be curious to know how fans will view Nolan Arenado this season because of that, right?
314-399-9646. That's the Air Comfort Service text line. The YouTube chat is available for you at youtube.com/101ESPN-STL. And we've also got the mic drop feature on the 101 ESPN app. Scott Lee Heating and Cooling mic drop feature. Go ahead and put them in there. How do you feel about Nolan Arenado now?
That's how you.
You're questioning the BFIB?
No, the opposite.
I'm not questioning it. No, I'm not questioning them, because I'm curious. Like you mentioned, Torrey Krug, and it's the perfect example. I thought this was more of the Vladdy situation, which was, hey, Vladdy wanted the hell out of the Blues organization. That was a Vladdy thing, because the Blues loved him, and they still wanted him here. It's why they didn't trade him in the offseason. They waited till a deadline when they were out of playoff contention. But this is more of the Krug situation. And the Blues fans weren't too happy with Torrey Krug. Now, I think the thing that really hurt Torrey Krug was, A, he wasn't playing well, but it's not like Nolan was playing to his level either. But what hurt the Krug situation was you knew the return, right?
I also think people already had a bad taste in their mouth about Krug. Like, the reason that he was here was because...
got tied to Pietrangelo.
Yeah, Petro wasn't, and you're the direct replacement. I think that's always hurt the feelings towards both Falk and Torrey Krug.
And I think it's a little unfair. But
somewhat, but also it is what it is, right? That's what the money is for, and the Blues paid them pretty handsomely when they were able to come here to St. Louis and gave them the no-trade clause accordingly. But Arenado was the opposite. Arenado was somebody that you wanted to come here to St. Louis. Alex had been banging that drum for 5 years. So the reception is a little different in how they arrived here, which makes this part, I think, a little less clunky.
Well, and I think, like, the Blues were searching for a number 1 defenseman, right? And you saw what the return was. It was reported it was Travis Sanheim. And
it was
like,
a part of this tournament.
Yeah, and it was like, wow, that guy, we're getting Sanheim by dumping Torrey Krug? That's a great trade. And then it got nixed because of Krug. And it's like, well, wait a minute, Krug, what the hell? You didn't know the return from Arenado. That never got reported. Right. My guess is it was nothing but prospects, and low-level prospects at that. But I am curious about how he will be received by the fan base. But the second thing for me is I still think it was a failed offseason. And I think it was probably an offseason destined for failure. Now, I will say this. I do think there is one way potentially this offseason isn't a failure. I still think there will be some things that I look back on like, okay, could you not have pivoted and gone more of a youth movement in the rotation then?
But
like
when?
Mats and Fetty?
When do you do that? Because this didn't happen until 10 days ago.
I think, and this is the other thing, I think Mo had a terrible read on the market. Because, like, okay, so the Astros deal, he thought he could get done, and that made sense. He did get it done. And then after that it was, okay, so we know the Red Sox are still in on Bregman. Right, so we're going to sit around. But why not still look at your pitching and pivot, right?
Because
you could pivot on your pitching at any point.
But if you trade Nolan Arenado to the Red Sox, you didn't need to pivot. And this is why I think he was between a rock and a hard place this offseason. And listen, I'm not trying to cape for Mo. I'm not. He had a tough offseason, and it ended up blowing up in his face. But if you're committed to this version of your offseason, and they clearly were, you have to see it through. And that means waiting on this Bregman market, and I think it went a lot longer, so maybe he did have a bad read on it. But I don't think anybody had a read on the Bregman market that it was going to last this long all the way up until basically the start of spring training. And Bregman was seemingly between, okay, do I go to Boston on a short-term deal or do I go somewhere else on a long-term deal? And every report that emerged suggested he needs a long-term deal. And Boston never budged on that. They still didn't budge on it. They ended up getting him on a short-term deal. So I think he had the exact right read on it. It just blew up in his face not once but twice this offseason. The Astros deal got nixed by Arenado after he said he would go to them. And then the Red Sox deal got nixed by the Red Sox because after Bregman had said all offseason, I'm not signing a short-term deal. Guess what he did? He signed a short-term deal. I can't blame Mo for that.
But to me, Arenado never affected the Cardinals' pitching decision, right? They could have created a spot for McGreevy in their rotation.
But they didn't want to. It's pretty clear at this point.
Yeah, I don't think pitching was their priority. It was position players.
If you're going to say you're in a youth movement, to me, it wasn't just on the position player side. It's on the pitching side as well. I mean, we saw
I'm
Michael
with you there.
McGreevy in the season, right? All three of us are at the point where we're like, hey, that guy deserves to be in your starting rotation. He may not end up working out because he does live on the Babbitt block, because he is a guy that pitches to contact, and you can only have a handful of those guys in your rotation.
I'm with you on this.
Figure it out, though.
Yeah.
This
But
is
they
the
still
perfect year
could.
to
Mats
figure
could
it
be
out.
in your bullpen on opening day.
Potentially, but their off season, for it to even push away from being a failure in my mind, now is relying on what Oli Marmol's decision making is, right? Because you can still accomplish the youth movement. It's complicated now with Arenado if you're going with a defensive first lineup. If you're going with Siani in center, you're going with Pajes behind the plate. Well, now we're really stuck in a rock between a hard place, because we've got some young guys now sitting on our bench because we don't want to put them in the lineup because we're worried about our defense and winning.
That makes
and
sense.
then the same with the rotation decision. Like, if you're going to say, hey, we've got Steven Matz, but he's in the rotation because of the contract, no. This is a youth movement. McGreevy needs to start. Okay, the young bats need to start, and it's not about the wins and losses this season. We agree with.
It's not supposed to be. Yeah, I agree.
It is
so they
now.
need to figure. They need to, their offseason right now, to me, is tilting towards failure. I think I can push more towards the neutral side of things of, hey, it wasn't a success, probably wasn't all-out failure, but I can start to really push towards that neutral side if Oli Marmol makes the right decision.
Strangely, I think their offseason is going to be determined by their trade deadline. And we can get more into that as we continue along here with Alex and T-Bone on BK. We've got Jordan Deacon, by the way, back in the studio for us today, doing a fantastic job. We're broadcasting live at the E&B Granite Studios out at the Centene Community Ice Center, where the Blues are back on the ice this morning. Not anticipating that Jordan Bennington or Colton Parayko are going to be out there for
What are
them.
they doing?
Yeah, they had a pretty
Get
good
out
night
there.
last night, and we'll talk about what Benner was able to do on the ice for Team Canada with Mike McKenna, former NHL goalie, when he joins us next year on BK and Ferrario.
101 ESPN Sports Center.
I'm Jordan Deacon. This Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Last night was the Four Nations Face-Off Championship game. Canada came away with a 3-2 victory in overtime against USA. Big thanks to Jordan Binnington. We'll get to see him back in action with the St. Louis Blues twice this weekend. The Jets come into town tomorrow with pregame at 5 and puck drop at 6. And then on Sunday, the Colorado Avalanche are in town for pregame at 4 and puck drop at 5 right here on your home for the Blues, 101 ESPN. I'm Jordan Deacon. This Sports Center update was driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy. Together we drive. Are you kidding me?
This is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. We're broadcasting live from the E&B Granite Studios at the Centene Community Ice Center. E&B Granite, Bernie Fedorko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring. We're going between the pipes with former NHL goaltender Mike McKenna.
Saved by Mike McKenna. How do you like me now?
Between the Pipes is refreshed by Macadoodle Spirits, fine wine, beer, and cigars. Now open in Darden Prairie.
There are very few people in the country that I'd rather be talking to today than Mike McKenna. He's a former NHL goalie. He's a St. Louis native. You can follow him on Twitter at Mike McKenna56. He joins us each and every Friday here on BK and Ferrario, and he can give us a goaltender's perspective on what we witnessed last night, which is as good of a performance as you're going to see in a winner-take-all game. And the only reason I can't say the best performance you'll see is because, well, we've seen a few of those here in St. Louis by Jordan Binnington. Binnington was amazing last night, especially in that third period and overtime. 20 consecutive saves to finish that thing off. Mike, we appreciate the time as always, my man. What did you make of Benner's performance last night?
It's got the hair on my arm standing up. Honestly, watching a goalie perform at that level is so much fun. And part of it's because, I kind of, not at that scale. I never won a Stanley Cup. I've never won a Four Nations tournament. Never, honestly played that many games of significance at the NHL level. But I still know what it's like to make big saves at a big moment in critical pressure-packed situations, whether it's minor league level, college, juniors, even youth tournaments, And you're watching somebody make saves and feel emotions that you just simply do not get in everyday life. And for him to be on the right side as the victor at the end of the game is what it should have been for Jordan Binnington. I hate that as an American. I mean, I've never had so many people talking hockey with me, except for the 2019 run, as I have now. It really captivated the American audience. And I do think as St. Louisans, the response today that I've seen and talked about is really cool, that here's our guy for a lot of the fans, right? That's what this is our goalie. This is the Blues goalie. This is the man that led the Blues to a Stanley Cup, and you got to see another glimpse of it yesterday. And in the same building in Boston, guys. Can you believe it? They're going to be seeing Benner in their nightmare in that city.
Yeah, there was nothing sweeter than seeing what I just assumed was a lot of Boston fans kind of upset in USA jerseys watching Jordan Binnington celebrate.
He said last night in his post-game press conference, he was asked what it was like to do it again in Boston, and he said, I don't think a lot of people here in Boston are big fans of me.
You know what the best part about it, too, is? They were the road team also, so they were in the same locker room that the Blues were in, and I can only imagine they celebrated with champagne and beer like the Blues did when they won the Cup. They're going to probably have to restructure that locker room again like they did after the 2019 Cup run.
Well, the only thing I'm disappointed is that they didn't call in Macadoodles to cater the business on the inside, because we do have plenty of champagne and bubbles for them. But, looking at that game, these weren't routine saves that looked good. The blocker save that Binnington made going to his right on Austin Matthews is repeating over and over again in my head. And it's doing it because I got to watch it live, and I got to watch it with my daughter, who's also a goaltender. And to see her face light up and to see her go, look at the way he's tracking the puck. Look at his head. Look at his it's so dude, as a parent, to hear your kid be that enthused and really dialed, right? The details of what Binnington did to make that save, it hits every nerd bone in my body. And then he backs it up 10 seconds later with a huge windmill glove save, like Marc-Andre Fleury style, It was just fun to watch, guys. He deserved to win. He was playing loose. He was free. You could see that. It's still there, guys. Big game. Chris Kerber says it all the time. If you have a game that you have to win, Benner's his guy, and I see why. This is a big reason why last night.
Of course, once that happened, and Binnington obviously is at the top of everybody's minds because of his success, Mike, his name gets going right back into the rumor mill of people saying, like, oh, Jordan Binnington, his stock has never been higher. Do you look for a trade now? Talk to me about why that would be a bad decision for the Blues.
Yeah, I just don't think the Blues are there yet to put all their eggs in a basket with Joel Hofer. And I also think that Binnington's stock is at $6 million. He's a bit of a value for a starting goalie when you look at the other top names in the league. At the other end of the ice, Connor Hellebuck he's pushing well over $8 million, and it shows head to head. He can beat him, even though Hellebuck he's a top 3 goalie in the world. Where's Benner? He's right in that call too. And on any given night, you can do it. So I don't think trading Binnington is the right play right now. If Joel Hofer was in the same place as a Dustin Wolf right now out in Calgary, who's clearly ready for a bigger role, knowing the Blues' aspirations of being a playoff team next year, of making noise, I just think it's a different dynamic if you go into that season with a rent-a-goalie and Joel Hofer as opposed to a Jordan Binnington and Joel Hofer between pipes.
We're talking to Mike McKenna here on 101 ESPN, former NHL goalie. He joins us each and every Friday here on the show. He does so on behalf of Macadoodles. We'll talk to him about what they've got going on at Macadoodles here in just a little bit. Mike, what goes into, you mentioned he's a big game guy. He is somebody that you can trust when you get into those moments. As a former professional athlete yourself, you've been around players, maybe not at the same capacity as Jordan Binnington, but guys that thrive in those moments. What is it that leads to that ability, in your opinion?
I've thought about this a lot, and it's a fantastic question. Some people you can just say are born to win, and it's real. Like, some people just win. But I do think that a lot of times this is born from trial and error. For myself, it took me the better part of being 30-something years old and already having 10 seasons under my belt before I could really crack the code on being a performer in playoffs. And a lot of people don't get that runway. So I actually think a lot of just the mentality of being a winner comes from the playing at the younger levels. You learn to do it at the NHL, you learn to do it in the American League, college, junior, wherever. But, when you're younger, and what I mean by that is really like junior college, minors, you just learn what it's like to carry yourself with confidence and to be unfazed by the situation, by the moment, to be able to live in the moment. And it really takes a freedom to do that. And I find the players that thrive the best clutch performers I've ever seen in my life are the ones who are generally pretty loose. They're not uptight before games. They're not freaking out. They're just going about their business. It's either businesslike or they're loose. And to me, the ones that you can tell somebody's freaking and they're sweating like crazy, you're just going, oh, boy, this puck's going to be bouncing off their blade tonight. You can really see it, I think.
So, Mike, Blues obviously are back in action, NHL back in action tomorrow night. Blues taking on the Winnipeg Jets. We've talked a lot about it this week, but from your perspective, what are you most honed in on with this Blues team in their final 26 games?
The cohesiveness of it. I also can't wait to see what happens after trade deadline when I think inevitably you're going to see players coming up from Springfield. And I think for myself, it's a different perspective maybe than, fans who are still just hoping in some way the Blues can make the playoffs or get close to it. I'm really looking at it as the kind of the feeling out period on some players. I'd love to see the prospects, what they can do. I'd also like to see what that back end looks like now that it has been finally healthy for a little bit. It matters to me. So that's my greatest intrigue. It's also, can the Blues just tighten up a little bit? They still, the looseness defensively that started to creep in before the break, it had been a little bit better. I'd like to see them start shutting games down and giving Benner and Hofer a better chance to do what they do. And that's going to be kind of interesting when you're starting to filter people in and out of the lineup, which is what I expect to happen post-trade deadline.
All right, Mike, final question, hockey-related, that I've got for you. This Four Nations face-off was huge. I haven't seen the numbers yet. I think it's going to take them a couple of days to officially get them, like, all documented and everything. But I have to imagine last night you got 6+ million viewers nationwide for that final between U.S. and Canada after I think the previous matchup was like $4.5 million just in the United States alone. What does this mean for the future of the NHL at the All-Star break? It sounds like next year you've got the Olympics, and then a couple of years after that they're doing like the World Championship or whatever it's going to be called. So they've got a few of these ready to go in the hopper. But what did you make of this? What did this mean for hockey at the All-Star game? What can it mean for other sports when it comes to doing events like this? Big picture-wise, what did this do?
Plays better in hockey than it does in other sports. Better than it does in football or baseball. It's a unique thing, I think, for hockey. I would just be careful not to make it too regular. It has to still be special, and the passion that came out on the ice was born of just a lack. We've been starving for this, like just starving to see best on best. Look at the way Brady Tkachuk plays, a human wrecking ball. You think he was excited? I think it every 2 years, every 4 years, whatever it looks like. I'll be honest, I actually like this format better than I like the Olympics. It gave something intriguing in the middle of the season that didn't shut it down, for what seems like a month with the Olympics. It really worked well. And you saw the best on best. I would like to see them just make the rosters as flexible as they can. If you want to add somebody, bring them on in, do what you need to do. Paul Bissonnette was right about it. If Canada wanted to bring in Tom Wilson for a big grudge match type game, let them do it, right? Hands off. But I think it was amazing for the sport, for America in general. We actually rallied around something as a group, which was great. We weren't divided in this. I love that. I'd like to see a lot more of it. So. And you'll see that this weekend, too. And then next weekend after that, people coming together. Guys, Blue Note Cup's coming up for youth hockey in town, and that's just – I can't tell you how cool that is for people to see if they get a chance.
Wanted to ask you about that, Mike, before we get you out of here. Tell us a little bit about what people are going to be able to see with the Blue Note Cup youth hockey going on here in town.
To me, it's maybe the best thing the Blues have ever done in this city, other than coming to town and winning a Stanley Cup. The creation of the Blue Note Cup, led by Tom Stillman and his group, has done things for youth hockey in this city that I could have never dreamed of as a kid myself. This weekend is the first of the playoff games. It's one and done, a single elimination. If you win 3 games in most categories of youth hockey, you may be skating around the ice with a cup in your hands, a physical cup. And it happens at Centene out in Maryland Heights, where the Blues practice. And next weekend is when the championship games start to happen. Saturday, Sunday, you can't find a parking spot out there. You got to park at the casino and walk over. And I'm telling you, if you want to see families together, organizations together, the coolest atmosphere, it's free. It's as pure as it gets, guys. I love it so much. I huge credit to the Blues and what they've done to get this off the ground. And of course, we'll be rooting on the Kirkwood B12 team from Kiwi B12 team in this event, right, guys? My daughter's got a big matchup tomorrow at 4:30 at the barn, so we're going to be outside for some playoff hockey.
Oh, my gosh, that's going to be ice cold. It's going to be a winter classic out there.
Yeah, we're a little nervous about conditions, but you know what? The other team has to play in it, too, and just looking forward to it. It's really, really cool.
Mike, before we go, we always have to ask you about what's going on at Macadoodles. You mentioned all the bubbly that the Four Nations guys could have been celebrating with last night, but what do we got going on?
Well, I can finally say that we do have some Buffalo Trace / Sazerac allocated items hitting shelves this week. It will happen. They will be out. Now, I'm not saying we're going to have 3,000 cases out there, folks, but I can tell you things will be competitively priced. They will be available. But beyond that, it's really events, guys. March 6th, we've got an event, a dinner, or not a dinner, but a ticket coming in where Blacksmith Distillery and Wood Hat, they're both from Missouri. They're going to do a Missouri History 101 course. That is on March 6th. $20 reserve ticket. 15 of that can go towards purchase of either of their products at the end of the night. So you'll get a couple tastings. You'll also get a Missouri history lesson when it comes to whiskey from Russ at Blacksmith and Gary at Wood Hat. And then on March 13th is our Big Irish Whiskey Festival. We can't wait to host it. We've got some allocated items in. We will also be doing an allocated raffle that day on top of doing tastings and great pricing on all of our Irish whiskey. And that's a name like McKenna working at a place called Macadoodles. You know it's going to be a big event, fellas.
Well, Mike, we're looking forward to that. I think I'm going to go ahead and venture out there this week. If you got some Buffalo Trace allocations, that is calling my heart over to Macadoodle. So I will see you very, very soon. We appreciate the time, as always, my friend. Enjoy yourself this week and try to stay warm out there, man.
You got it. BK, Ferrario, you guys be good. Take care of that Tanner fella. I'll talk to you guys later.
We'll do our best. No promises.
It's impossible.
But we'll do what we can. That's Mike McKenna joining us as he does each and every Friday. We always appreciate his time here on BK and Ferrario. Coming up next, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Ask Us Anything, sports or otherwise, here on 101 ESPN.
Live from the Centene Community Ice Center inside the E&B Granite Studios, this is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. E&B Granite, Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring. You've got questions, we may have the answers. Maybe. It's BK and Ferrario's Questions and Answers on 101 ESPN.
439999646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Ask Us Anything. I typically like to take this a little longer. Today we will unfortunately have to go a little shorter, but it is not too unfortunate because Cam Fowler, Blues defenseman, going to join us here in just a little bit. We're broadcasting live from the E&B Granite Studios out of the Centene Community Ice Center, and Cam Fowler will join us as the Blues return to play starting this weekend. So stay tuned for that. He'll join us in a little more than 5 minutes. From the 314, guys, what's up? My wife asked me if you had to choose, would you go on a cruise or the beach? I said cruise. What would you choose?
Probably the beach, because after I did the cruise with my wife, she was in the bathroom upchucking the whole time. So I would go the beach.
Depends what you prefer. If you prefer going on if you prefer really good food and all that stuff, if that's your vibe, cool. Cruise could be great for you. If you prefer more adventures and trying to find out what it is about a city that makes it special, that's personally my preference. I like doing that kind of stuff, exploring a city. Then go to the beach and then see what's going on around it. So it just depends your vibe. But for me personally, I would choose the beach in that scenario. From the 636, guys, any chance that Brady Tkachuk ever plays for the Blues?
Yes. I don't know if it's going to be trade or when he hits free agency, but I personally believe both will play for the Blues at some point.
From the 636, guys, BK, what's a higher number? The amount of times that you've used the Peloton in the year 2025 or the Chiefs Super Bowl losses? It is actually the Peloton for me in 2025. I've been using it this week. It is very cold outside, which means I am not getting my ass out there to go on a run.
I think he's lying.
Chance.
Chiefs Super Bowl losses.
From the 618, guys, do you always believe your takes or do you ever say stuff just for entertainment value? I can't do that. It is not something that I have inside of me. I do a lot of research on stuff. I am an over-preparer, and so when I say stuff on the air, it is for my own belief. That is what I truly think. There are some people that can do that. It's just not something that I have as a skill, frankly.
Yeah, no, I'm the same way. I don't know if I can actually argue something that I don't believe. Typically, the stuff that we get into arguments about, guys like Jordan Binnington, Colton Parayko, it's pretty obvious that I believe they're great players. So when I do that, I'm actually believing something.
With Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. We've got Jordan Deacon back in the studio for us, holding things down. Coming up next, Cam Fowler, Blues defenseman, is going to join us here on the show. He was a participant in the international experience in the 2014 Winter Olympics for Team USA. What did he make of the Four Nations face-off? How does he think that they can capitalize on this in the NHL moving forward? Cam Fowler joins us next year on 101 ESPN.
and Ferrario are broadcasting live from the E&B Granite Studios at the Centene Community Ice Center on 101 ESPN. E&B Granite, Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN, and we are happy to be joined in studio out of the E&B Granite Studios at the Centene Community Ice Center by Blues defenseman Cam Fowler. We appreciate him taking some time as the Blues back on the ice today, leading into this weekend's game. Return to play, coming off of this Four Nations break. Cam, we appreciate the time, man. How you doing today?
I'm good. Yeah, thanks for having me in. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. So let's start with the obvious, which is last night's game. I mean, an unbelievable game to watch for everybody. Benner, Parayko both on the ice. Bennington does what we all kind of anticipated that he would do. What was your perspective watching that game as somebody that's been on the U.S. side of this in international events, but you got a couple of teammates on the Canadian side?
Yeah, well, I think first and foremost, I think it was just an amazing event for hockey fans and for the NHL in general, just to put on a display like that with the best players in the world. So just as a hockey fan myself, kind of removing the American side out of it,
Sure.
It was a great game to watch, and obviously I'm happy for Benner and Pears. You know, they deserve it. They're great people, and they played great the whole tournament. And sad for my American guys, but I think, like I said, it was just an amazing game to watch. Goes into overtime and could have gone either way. So for hockey fans, I'm sure it was a great event for everybody.
I think, Cam, the narrative after this tournament was just how much engaged these players are representing their country and just how much they put out there. From somebody who has done this, like, there's just no way around it. It is 110% in when you're those players in that locker room.
Yeah, I think anytime you have the chance to represent your country, you put on the USA jersey, Canada jersey, all those emotions and everything, just kind of boil up when you go out on the ice and you're playing against your rival. Obviously Canada and US are big-time rivals, and I wasn't sure how it was going to go with the tournament that's kind of started from scratch, and you have 4 teams there, but you saw in the first game that they played that there was a lot of emotion. Guys were fired up, and that carried itself all the way through the tournament.
There's been a lot of talk now about what this means moving forward, right? The Four Nations face-off was this huge success. You've got the Olympics next year. They've got another tournament that's coming up in a few years as well. This is still the All-Star break, technically. How do you view this? Do you want them to continue with more and more of these international tournaments that take place during the All-Star break? Do you want to keep having some version of the All-Star game? How do you view this in future years?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I think it's a balance that you have to find. I think there are going to be years where you should showcase the NHL and the NHL guys as an all-star type format, but then there's also opportunities. Obviously, the Olympics, guys are going to want to represent their countries, and then I think you would have to talk with the guys who played in the Four Nations and see how their body's holding up.
Sure.
How, because that's that will affect things moving forward too, because we're in a critical part of the season, and you'll have guys that are banged up after playing in this tournament. So you kind of have to weigh those pros and cons, but from a player myself, I think the most that you can showcase the best players in the world, get them on TV for everybody to see, I think that's always a win for the NHL.
What's that ramp-up period like for just the team itself? Because you've played in one of these before, when they're off and then you come back and the group that's ready to come back and get set for play. That's a different feel as a player when you were on vacation for a couple of weeks versus when you're playing in a tournament getting set for the second half of the season.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I mean, for those guys, I know they hopped on a plane the day after, our last regular season game before the break. They jump right into practice. They play an intense tournament, and so they never really have time to kind of settle into break mode. They're always going. And then for us, we ended up having, I think it was 8 or 9 days totally off the ice. So for us, we have to stay in shape. We have to do what we need to do in order to be ready to go at the end of the break. And then these guys, I'm sure they're tired and dealing with some injuries, but they should, they should pick up right where they left off, because they've been playing some crazy competitive hockey over the last 10 or 12 days.
As casual observers, we watched the game last night, and it's an amazing showcase of the talent, right? Mm-hmm. As somebody that's in the game and that knows the intricacies of it, what did you see on display last night? Fill in for people that are watching from home. What made that so special from your hockey mind?
I think the one thing that stuck out to me is you look at both teams and the offensive firepower that they have and the best players in the world. You might think to yourself, this could be a shootout. There could be goals left and right. There could be highlight reel plays. But then you actually sit down and watch the game, and it's legitimate playoff style, tight checking, great goaltending, and the box score either way is 25 to 30 shots. Like it's a tight checking game, and I think when you get the best players in the world together, it just showcases kind of the balance and the depth that both teams had defensively, goaltending, and we saw great hockey. We didn't see many mistakes, and then the best players rose up, and Connor McDavid goal in overtime. Like the margin of error is just so thin in those tournaments, but you just saw amazing hockey, great depth on both teams, or all four teams that were there.
Do you find yourself at times, Cam, just watching Connor McDavid, whether it's in game action or on television, be like, it is absurd what this guy is doing on the ice?
Yeah.
Probably more so when you're on the ice with them than watching on TV.
As a follow-up to that, for you, who's the biggest pain in the ass to go up against?
Well, I think there's different ways that I kind of weigh it differently. There's guys like Connor, Nathan McKinnon, guys who just with their speed, their talent, they can just break you down at any point on the ice. And then there's also guys like a Tom Wilson or Jamie Benn, like guys that I have to be aware of that are going to run me through the boards too at some. So like as a D-man, I'm winging those things when I'm out there, but McKinnon's obviously he's named tournament MVP, amazing player. Connor McDavid, all the top end talent that we have in this league is just unbelievable, and that tournament was a great showcase for that.
Speaking of that top end talent, we obviously have seen Colton Parayko's career in here in St. Louis, but since you've been acquired, you've been matched up with him an awful lot, Cam. What stands out to you about the way Colton Parayko goes about his business?
Yeah, well, he first, I don't think he gets nearly enough credit kind of nationwide that he deserves. I think he is really the real deal and a blend of someone that has that size who can move the way he does. He's a pretty fluid skater, covers a lot of space out there, and then having a career year offensively too with his shot and his he gets involved too offensively sometimes as kind of that fourth forward down there. He can protect the puck. I think he has a blend of everything to his game that makes him such a special player. And for me, it's been a real pleasure and a treat to be alongside of him most nights.
We mentioned this at the beginning, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about Benner's performance from last night. He's now, it's like a .950 save percentage in winner-take-all games. What is it like as somebody that is a teammate of him to see him in that kind of a moment last night?
Yeah, well, I think he's just the ultimate gamer. I think as the stakes kind of climb, Benner's game only goes up. He's proven it in the cup run that they've had as one of the best goaltenders in the world, and then he showed it again last night. A game like that, so much pressure. I can only imagine what it would be like as a goaltender facing that pressure. I know what it's like as a player, but you have the nation behind you. You have people watching you, and to rise up to that occasion and play as well as he did, it just shows, he has that dog in him when the game is on the line, and that's hard to find.
I know it's only been a few games, Cam, playing with Binnington, but is there a sense of comfort on the ice when you've got a goaltender like that as a defenseman? Like, from your perspective, do you alter maybe the way that you handle the puck in your own zone versus if it was a different goalie?
Yeah, well, I think he is really kind of like a extra pair of hands back there in the way that he can move the puck, and both of our goalies are actually amazing at doing that. And there's only a handful of goalies in the league that can legitimately start a breakout, and we have two of them. So when you're back there, they get their hands on the puck. you just want to make sure you give them enough space to make a play. And more times than not, they make a great play, and then we're going the other way.
All right, Cam, we're talking to Cam Fowler here on 101 ESPN, Blues defenseman, as the Blues back in action this weekend, getting back on the ice today at the Centene Community Ice Center. Did want to turn the page a little bit. Here in St. Louis, the Cardinals are always a big topic of conversation, and one of their players, his name is Nolan Arenado, and he decided to use his no-trade clause that he had this offseason to nix a deal that was previously in place. And the reason I bring this up is because you decided to come here. You chose that this was a destination that you were interested in. As a player, when you have that no-trade protection, what is that process like as you're going through it and deciding, okay, this is a place I'm willing to go, but maybe not here, here, or here? What was that process like for you and your family?
Yeah, well, it was an interesting process, something that I had never been through before. And I think as players, we work really hard to give ourselves the opportunity of having a little bit of control in those situations. So you want to make sure that you're kind of doing your due diligence and you're going through the process and not making any, quick decisions. So I knew this was kind of a place that had been talked about for a couple years, and I've known that Army has been interested in kind of my situation there in Anaheim. So when it was presented to me close to around the time the deal was took place, I had a lot of honest conversations with people. I talked with my family, my agent. I talked with guys that had played in St. Louis. I just tried to get all the information that I possibly could. And at the end of the day, everything that I heard was just nothing but praise for this organization and for the city. And then I also have a lot of faith in Army and Monty and the coaching staff. So all of that played a role into me coming here, and ended up being a great decision for me and my family. But the longer I'm here, the more I realize kind of the tie between the team and the community and what it means to the people here of St. Louis. And I'm just trying to get to know everyone and understand that relationship with the fans too, and that's something that I'll continue to work on.
We were joking around before you came in. You probably knew so much about St. Louis, the amount of former Blues that you were a part of, teammates with, whether it was in Anaheim or in the Olympics. It was like Oshie and Falk and Shattenkirk, and it's like you had plenty of Blues players that you played with.
I did, yeah.
It's like the entire 2014 roster is either now or previously was a part of the Blues.
Yeah, no, I know. It's I did have a lot of people that I was able to lean on. Shaddy was a big one. Mm-hmm. Pat Maroon. I played with him, obviously. And then, I played with Falker, Suits. So I had a lot of resources to be able to understand the dynamics here and talk with the guys. And like I said, it was nothing but praise for this team and this organization.
Cam, one more question from me, and then we'll let you go. And we appreciate you hopping on. But, you were a part of so many successful teams in the early years with the Anaheim Ducks, and a lot of guys who had veteran experience, and now you're that player. Jim Montgomery has talked a lot about handling adversity and figuring out how to deal with adversity. Have you noticed that as kind of a growth with this younger Blues team, and how difficult is it to get comfortable being uncomfortable?
Yeah, well, I think that's a big challenge for most teams with the season that we play. There's going to be ups and downs, and I was coming from a team in Anaheim with, the majority of players were 23 and under, so that was kind of my role there, was trying to help these guys throughout an 82-game season and understand there's going to be ebbs and flows to what we do, and that the best way to go about it is try and stay even keel and understand that you have to try and improve every day. And I think that's what we're trying to do here. I think we understand that, and we feel like we have all the pieces, but we're lacking a little bit of the consistency that we need in order to get to where we want to be. And I know that's the main focus for us coming out of this break is consistency and understanding the way we have to play in order to be successful.
Well, the schedule doesn't get easy. Back-to-backs this weekend, Winnipeg and Colorado, both at home. Cam Fowler going to be back on the ice for the St. Louis Blues, and we appreciate you taking a little bit of time with us today. Thanks so much hopping on with us after you were on the ice earlier. Thanks,
no problem.
Cam.
Yeah, no problem.
It's Cam Fowler, Blues defenseman, joining us here on 101 ESPN. We appreciate his time, certainly on BK and Ferrario. Coming up next, what did this tournament do for hockey? What does this mean big picture-wise? We'll talk about that here on 101 ESPN.
Live from the Centene Community Ice Center inside the E&B Granite Studios, this is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. E&B Granite, Bernie Fedurko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
Great pass, McDavid scores! Connor McDavid wins it for Canada! And Jordan Bennington has done it again inside the TD Garden.
Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. Jordan Deacon back in the studio for us today. We're broadcasting live at the E&B Granite Studios out at the Centene Community Ice Center. We were just able to catch up with Cam Fowler, Blues defenseman. He was part of the 2014 Team USA that went to the Olympics. Unfortunately, they finished fourth. Last night, they finished second. Canada was amazing, and Jordan Bennington was spectacular. Alex, we gave our full thoughts on that in the Open today. If people want to check it out, go to the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, and the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Schaefer Door Company.
But I do want to talk about this tournament and what it means for the NHL moving forward, because there's been a lot of discussions on basically a comparison between what we saw over the weekend in the NBA, which was just a disaster class. Like it was like 12 minutes of basketball and 2 hours of nonsense that took place during the All-Star game. And you have the backdrop of this Four Nations face-off where the hockey's unbelievable. The guys really care, and everybody gets into it, so much so that you had real injuries that are going to affect things as we return to play here. Matthew Tkachuk is like a legit injury. Charlie McAvoy is going to be out for an extended period of time. It sounds like Shea Theodore is going to be out for a while as well. There's some stuff that took place in this tournament. But it was fun as hell to watch. The viewership was unbelievable. What do you think is going to be the lasting impact of this tournament that we just witnessed over the last 10 days, Alex?
I think it's about to take at least the common sports fan and the viewership of hockey to the next level. And I'm not talking regular season. I think regular season is going to go right back to where it typically is, because there's just not as much luster with the regular season. And frankly, after what you just witnessed, you turn on a regular season game on this weekend and watch Chicago and Montreal play against each other. You're probably going to turn that off about 5 seconds in.
I won't turn it on to begin with.
Yeah, it's smart. I can understand that one. But what it does, in my opinion, is it raises the viewership in the playoffs this year. Because I think a lot of people saw that and they're like, man, how do I get more of that? I don't want to wait till the Olympics next year. And somebody's going to be like, well, check out the Stanley Cup playoffs. Or when the playoffs roll around and the promotion for it, it's not best on best, but it's pretty darn close to it when you're talking about some of the teams that are going to be there. So I think as the playoffs move this April, you're going to see a lot more viewership rise. And then by the Olympics next year, man, there are going to be so many people paying attention solely to that men's hockey tournament, because not only do you potentially get the rematch between USA and Canada, but maybe Russia's going to be a part of it. You're going to have a lot more best on best players that are going to be playing in that tournament style. So I think what Gary Bettman did is so smart, because that tournament is going to just continue to build the anticipation of just that type of play.
Yeah, I really think the Olympics are going to get a huge boost from seeing a best-on-best tournament like this, and you get to see it again. And, like, I have to bring it up, especially if there are political things going on that lead to a little bit more angst between rivals, then you're definitely really going to see the Olympics. The playoffs is the one that I'm not sure of yet, because even if you watch playoff hockey, and I love playoff hockey, it's the best playoff format I think that exists right now in all the sports leagues. Even watching that is great on great, not best on best. And it would be different. It would be, you could tell a difference when you watch those games compared to watching a Four Nations tournament when you have truly the best players from all 30 teams compared to there's really good players on all these teams, but their third and fourth lines are not like what you saw in this tournament. So the playoffs are the one where I think there will be a boost. I don't think it will be a significant boost in the viewing, but the Olympics next year, yeah, I think those ratings are going to be through the roof.
So here's my question to you guys. My comparison for this would be baseball. What's the moment that you think baseball has had the most momentum based on what moment in the last 5 years?
Probably that World Baseball Classic finale where it was Shohei Ohtani versus Trout.
You'd agree with that, right? It was
Probably.
best on best, unbelievable tournament. The baseball was great. The environments were unbelievable down there in Miami for a lot of this thing. Like, it was just a really fun tournament that showcased the best players in the game. And you saw all of the bright young stars, similar to what we just witnessed with the Four Nations face-off. Do you guys remember what the World Series was that year? It was 2023. You guys remember what the World Series was that year? The momentum really gets going. It's right before the start of the season,
It was,
midway through spring training, and boom, we get into the regular season, and the World Series is
Dodgers, Astros.
Rangers versus Diamondbacks, the lowest-rated World Series in history.
I thought that was...
I think this was great. It was awesome. I loved every second of what we witnessed over the last 10 days, and I am not in any way trying to poo-poo the tournament that we just watched, because you can't. Like, what's the example of why this was bad? There was zero about this that I disliked. I just think that sometimes when we see stuff like this where it was awesome, we try to make it into something bigger than what it needs to be. It was unbelievable when we witnessed that World Baseball Classic, right? It's unbelievable when we see some of the Winter Classics early on in the NHL, or when we see stuff like Rickwood last year, or previously the Field of Dreams game that they had. That first one, the first Field of Dreams game was just this beautiful experience for baseball. And that can be it. We can just appreciate it for what it is and move on and say we don't need to do more of that. We don't need to oversaturate it with this. Now they have 27 different outdoor games every year in the NHL, right? It just becomes too much.
Yeah,
Apparently there's one in March. I had no idea.
That's the Stadium Series.
Baseball doesn't do the World Baseball Classic every year because that one was such a success. They're doing one again. It's coming up, I believe, next year, if I'm not mistaken.
Every 3 years, I think is what they're doing.
It's really smart. You don't oversaturate it. You allow it to have a little distance between them. Part of what made this so special for the NHL, man, these teams haven't faced off against each other in a decade. And that led to, between the distance between the last time that these teams faced off and the political tensions that naturally exist right now between the U.S. and Canada, you can't ignore that either. It all led to a perfect moment for this exact tournament to take place right now. And, oh, by the way, the talent in the NHL right now between these two sides is great, and most of them are still in their primes. So I say all of that to say this. I don't know how much of a lasting impact this is going to have. I think it got a lot more viewers on the NHL, and some of them will stick with it, and that's great for the league. And so, like, 2 years from now, next year you got the Olympics. I think it's going to be a good event for the NHL because it's just good hockey, and every time that the NHL is part of the Olympics, it's good for the league. A couple of years from then, you got another one of these versions. Don't try to make it too much. I think what they should do in the future, in my opinion, if I was like the NHL czar, I'd say every 2 years you have one of these international events. Make it like the Summer and the Winter Olympics, where every 2 years you've got this. You've got Olympics 1 year, 2 years later you've got Four Nations face-off, Five Nations face-off, a World Championship, whatever you want to call it at that point in time. But that's my personal perspective on it. It was incredible. It was a great 10 days for the league. You still got to figure out what those off years are, and you still got to figure out what you want to do with that all-star break in those years.
And I'm glad you brought up that World Series that we all forgot about of Rangers and who's the other one? Diamondbacks. Because I think, now no league could ever do this, but I think if you had Four Nations happen, and then once it's over, the playoffs started, then I think you would see that real carryover.
Oh, you just can't do that.
No, I agree. But what I'm saying is I think that's when you would see that moment.
Totally.
No league could ever do that.
Yeah.
I mean, because, like, look, Matthew Tkachuk's hurt for weeks. Well, the Florida Panthers don't want to start the playoffs tomorrow.
Right.
But the reason I bring that up is because now you go to the regular season. And the regular season hockey is fun. I mean, you go to 41 St. Louis Blues home games. It's fun. It's not the same atmosphere as watching the Stanley Cup playoffs. It's a complete different. Same with baseball. Like, you go from that World Baseball Classic, and they even have it worse. They don't even start the regular season. They go into spring training games again, which is preseason.
Well, that's what I was going to say. It's like, I wonder, and you can't pull it off because of the offseason, but I'd love to see that to where playoffs are over, and then you've got it. But playoffs end, you got all these dudes that have punctured ribs, and they're like, cool, I don't think I can play.
And that's why also I don't think other teams can emulate what we just witnessed with the NHL. It's very unique,
right?
What we just saw. Like, baseball teams would not allow their pitchers to do this in season. There's zero chance. Yeah. No chance. They didn't even like it in spring training, but in the regular season, absolutely not. No chance you'd get best on best in that scenario.
Soccer's the only one that can really do it because they can take a 2-week break just like the NHL, and they can send their guy somewhere. And though there is risk of injury, it's not like pitching, where those guys can break just a snap of a finger.
I think you could do something like this in basketball. I don't know that it would be the same because I don't think the tension is quite there the same way. Like even when they have those off-year tournaments in basketball, like that, where you have to qualify to get into the Olympics,
World Cup or whatever it is.
Yeah, you don't get the same best on best that you would in this scenario with the NHL. The player buy-in is a big part of it.
Well, I was just going to say, like the other sports, I don't think you're having players that are pushing for this. The NHL players have been pushing for this since they took them out of the Olympics. It was the owner side of it that was like, no, we don't want to stop our game and not get any of the money from the Olympics.
Part of that is the culture of hockey, and I'm not talking about like the toughness or anything like that, although that certainly is a backdrop of it, but I'm talking about the way that you're brought up in hockey.
Yeah.
There are world juniors from the time that you're like 16 years old?
Well, look here. They got a Blue Note Cup where these 9-year-olds are playing in a
But
tournament.
I'm talking about for your country.
Yeah.
Where you are representing not just your club team, but your country.
Right.
And the only two sports that really have that are soccer and hockey. And it's no coincidence that those are the two sports where stuff like this work. So I don't think it exists and it doesn't work in basketball the same way. The Olympics are awesome, but that's it's a one-off, and there's really no other way that you can do it. I think the best way that you could potentially do it is, we talked about this the other day on the show, maybe you have like a tournament where it's the best college programs are represented, where you got Kentucky going up against the stars from Kansas or North Carolina or Duke. Like that could maybe work, and then you've got another team that's the world team.
Yeah.
Maybe you do something like that, but that's a one-off. You could do that once, and then if you do it too much, it becomes, okay, well, I've seen Kentucky versus Duke.
Or the players don't care for it anymore. The guys got to play it, and they're like, cool, we're done. This is like representing your country as many times as possible.
And it helps that there's not one superpower in the sport, right? Like, U.S. is really good. Canada's been really good. Russia's been really good.
Sweden's been very good.
We've seen years where Sweden wins it, or the Finns pull off a
Finland's
surprise.
won it.
I mean, we were talking about, you mentioned the gold medal club that Bennington can get to.
Triple
He could
gold.
be the first goaltender to get triple gold. We were looking at Patrick Waugh. He never got the gold medal. The Czechs won a gold medal.
Yeah.
You're not getting that in basketball, right? Like, you wouldn't have the same tension U.S. versus Canada. There are teams that are countries that are starting to come up in basketball. They're still not at the level of the USA. The USA has dominated that since the Dream Team, and you lose some of that luster. What made U.S. versus Canada great last night? Anybody could have won the game. There's real tension. Either one of those teams could have won that hockey game.
I would push back on this a little bit. I do think that there is a little bit of that in basketball now, especially with France being what it is, with Wemby, and they're producing real stars. And there was a time when Spain was that team not too long ago as well. But I think what makes it different in the NHL is that it's not America's sport. What makes it different for us is that we're the underdogs.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that Americans love more than being the underdog. Think about any other sport, right? If your team is the one that is the hunter as opposed to the hunted, it's the best place to be. You know what's part of what's being really fun right now about a Mizzou basketball fan? I get to root for the underdog. It's a great story, right?
Yeah.
If you're a Bama fan, you don't get to experience that. If you're a Duke fan in basketball, you don't get to experience that. But there are times where, hey, our team comes out of nowhere. We were not expected to be anything. That's the best 2019 Blues. Yep. It's part of what made that run so special. 2006 and 2011 Cardinals. Part of what made it so special is that you weren't expected to win. And I think that's part of what makes it really cool in both hockey and in soccer as U.S. fans is, hey, man, it's the one opportunity really in international sporting events on this level that we get to the team international sporting events where we get to watch it and say, I don't know if we're going to win or not.
Yeah.
And in soccer, I know we're probably not going to win.
Yeah.
But you
too much of an underdog.
You get to see the build, and you get to see, okay, what could this be if we were able to take down the Goliath as David? And that's part of what made this tournament so fun as well.
I'm only going to use this word dumb because I don't like to say dumb an awful lot, but they use it on the text line multiple times from the 314. NHL shouldn't play in the Olympics. It should be amateurs. That, Sora Madam, is a dumb idea. Do you remember the year that they did the amateurs? Yeah. It was not fun. It was like 20, I don't even remember I think it was 2016, 2018.
It was the year when the NHL pulled them out. It was 2018 and then 2022. Because of, now that one made sense.
Yeah, COVID. God awful. So, no, professionals need to play
Germany
in that.
won gold. And Germany's
Germany never wins gold.
Update: Germany not a powerhouse in hockey. Although
they got Leon Draisaitl's
really good, but outside of that, they haven't developed anybody.
It's kind of like France going into that tournament. They'll have Alex Texier, but I don't know how good they're going to be.
With Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendricks, and I'm Brandon Kiley. You've got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. In 15 minutes, we'll dive into the juncture in the 1 o'clock hour. We're going to do our game of One's Gotta Go. It has returned now that the NFL season has come and went. Coming up next, I mentioned yesterday, hey, the Cardinals are going to have a top 10 player at every infield position Nation, according to Buster Olney. Not the case. We'll tell you who missed that list next year on 101 ESPN.
ESPN Sports Center.
I'm Jordan Deacon. This Sports Center update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Last night, the Four Nations Face-Off tournament wrapped up with Canada winning the championship game by a score of 3-2 in overtime. Big thanks to Jordan Bennington. We'll get to see him back in action tonight twice this weekend, with the Jets coming into town on Saturday with pregame at 5 and puck drop at 6. And then the Colorado Avalanche are in town on Sunday with pregame at 4 and puck drop at 5. We've also got college basketball this weekend for you right here on 101 ESPN. Houston versus Iowa State on Saturday with tip-off at 1. And then on Sunday, St. John's versus UConn with tip-off at 11. I'm Jordan Deacon. The Sports Center update was brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
This is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. We're broadcasting live from the E&B Granite Studios at the Centene Community Ice Center. E&B Granite, Bernie Fedurko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
With Alex and T1 on BK, you got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. So the other day we did a segment, Alex, on Buster Olney's top 10 list that he's putting out on ESPN.com. And in this top 10 list, he's going through each and every position in order. Started with catchers first, second, and we went to third base. So far, at that point in time, we had seen a Cardinal at least appear on the list on every single one of them. And then we got to shortstops today. And so I was like, okay, I wonder where Masyn Winn comes in. Because we thought, probably somewhere in the back half of the top 10. Number 1, Bobby Witt Jr. Seems reasonable to me. I'm certainly not a biased fan in any regard there. Number 2, Mookie Betts. Forgot he was going to be playing shortstop this year, to be totally candid with you. Number 3, Gunnar Henderson, who at any other list, any other position in the sport, probably would have a claim to be number 1, and yet he's number 3 on this list. He might be a top 6 player in all of baseball.
This position's ridiculous.
Number 4, Corey Seager. Number 5, Francisco Lindor. 6, Ellie De La Cruz, might be the most toolsy player in the league. Number 7, Trey Turner, who a couple of years ago got, $300 million from the Philadelphia Phillies. Number 8, Willy Adames. 9, Carlos Correa. And at 10, guy that I think is one of the most overrated players in Major League Baseball, Dansby Swanson.
Yeah, your new Derek Jeter.
Oh, yeah, you're new. This one I agree with, though.
Dansby Swanson could not hold Derek Jeter's jockstrap. Let's be real here.
That's PG-13
Yeah,
show.
come on, man. That is too
All right, Dansby Swanson's like
adult entertainment.
30% of the player that Derek Jeter was. Is that fair?
Yeah, well,
Okay.
I don't know,
Hold on, 30% is a jockstrap to you?
Yeah, I mean, you know. Anyways, so Masyn Winn did not make the top 10. He was on the others receiving votes, along with Ezekiel Tovar, the shortstop for the Rockies. Zach Neto, who we mentioned the other day, had 30 stolen bases, and nobody's ever heard of him. He plays for the LA Angels. He's a very good shortstop. And Jeremy Pena, who we've compared to Masyn Winn in the past as well. So, Alex, as I looked at this list, I thought to myself, man, other than Dansby Swanson, I just really don't know who else I would even consider Masyn Winn over. I think nobody at this point in time. Can Masyn Winn realistically do anything this year, Alex, in your mind, to be a top 9 shortstop in the sport? I'm going to take away 10 because that's where you get into the conversation. But top 9, do you think there's even a range of outcomes where that happens for him?
I think so, because I think he's got to add power, though. That's going to be the biggest thing. Number 9 was, because Trey Turner was 7. Who was number 9?
Correa,
that's right. Thank you.
Those doesn't play baseball, but when he does,
I know. He's missed 85 games, but when he's there, he's really good. Those are the guys like Trey Turner, Dansby Swanson, Carlos Correa. Those are the 3 guys that I would look at, and I'd say, okay, if he can add pop to his game, I would put him in the same conversation with those players, because I think his defense is as elite, if not better, than Carlos Correa, especially for all of the injuries that he's there. Trey Turner is not the 30-plus stolen base guy that he once was. Last year, I think he had 19 of them. Still
I think that's
good.
because of games played, though. What did he have?
Maybe
120 games.
Yeah, but the previous year, 30 and a 55 or 155. But I'd say if he's got injury issues and he can't play, that's a little concerning on my front. I look at a Masyn Winn and say, cool, if his goal is 30 stolen bases, we already know he's a guy that makes really good contact and can get on base. If you add pop to be a 20 to 25 home run hitter, now you're talking in somewhere between 7 and 10 or 7 and 9 on this top 10 list.
Yeah, I think it comes down to 2 things. One, a little aggression from some of those guys like Correa not being healthy. Willie Adames, I think his power numbers are going down because he's hitting in San Francisco now, not freaking Milwaukee.
Yeah.
But I also think it is the power, to Alex's point. Like Correa on that list. You guys know how many times Carlos Correa has hit 30 home runs in a season?
Most.
None.
Oh, really?
Carlos Correa has never had a 30 home run season.
I'm actually surprised by that.
The most home runs he had, now part of this is because of his health, but the most home runs he had was back in 2021 when he hit 26. For the most part, he's been a 20 to 25 home run guy in his career. If Winn can get to that spot, and he about 20, 25 home runs, and I don't know if that's in the range of outcomes for him, but if he can get there, still plays that Gold Glove level defense, brings up the stolen base total, he can absolutely be in this conversation as being a top 10, and not just like number 10, like anywhere between 7 and 9, as Alex was saying.
I think you add a little bit of speed, because most of these guys that we're talking about have that ability on the bases where you're talking, in a normal year, 20 stolen bases for most of the shortstops that are above him on this list. Now, some of them, it's like crazy, Ellie De La Cruz and Bobby Witt Jr., what they're doing on the base paths, but let's not hold them to that kind of a standard. But most of them are, 20-plus stolen bases on any given season. I also think for him, add that speed element into your game with doubles. Last year, he was pretty good in that regard. It wasn't like a huge weakness by any means, but he finished the season with 32 doubles. Can you get to 40? Can you push that up just a little bit? If you get to 40 doubles, and now we're talking about, 20 home runs. He had 15 last year. It's no slouch. 20 home runs, 40 doubles, 20-plus stolen bases this season. Now you get into the conversation with those guys that are in the top 7 or so. And all of those would be notable steps forward. I don't think any of them are crazy. 8 more doubles, 5 more homers. It's really the speed element in terms of the stolen bases that's the biggest, most notable jump. But he's talking about it openly this spring, that is a goal of his to get 30. And we're talking about him getting to 20. If the Cardinals are on board with that, I don't think it's crazy for him to get into that top 7 or 8 conversation at the shortstop position.
And let's remember back to early last season, right? Now, I don't remember how fast a start he got off to. I think he played really well early on. But he also had a back injury. Right, we didn't know at the time. We were freaking out why Brandon Crawford's starting once every 3 games. It was because he had a back issue. And now we don't know how long that lasts. I think it lasts about a month and a half if I had to guess. But if he has a full, healthy 162, maybe you do see what you're talking about. Because I don't think it's outrageous to say, hey, he could have 5 more home runs, or he could add 8 more doubles, or add more stolen bases. And to my Carlos Correa comp, looking at him, you know how many seasons he's had of 40 doubles?
Just a couple.
0.
No.
He's never
It's a
hit for 40.
T-bone game.
Yeah, I took
want
one
to
for
make it.
BK.
I want to make
You
want to
make it like you don't understand the
The
rules?
most doubles he had was 36. So he can get into having like these Correa lines. Now, again, Correa, some of that's altered because he hasn't been able to stay healthy. But if Winn stays healthy, he could absolutely get to those numbers that you're talking about.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. The YouTube chat is available for you at youtube.com/101ESPN JBAF3120 says on the YouTube chat.
Shorten that.
BK, Dansby posts and plays elite defense with league average offense. Kind of sounds like what we were hoping out of Masyn Winn, no? It does to a degree. I think he is less offensively gifted than what I'm hoping that Masyn Winn can be. Now, you look back at Dansby Swanson's career, OPS plus-wise, 68, 87, 89, 99, 98. Those are his seasons. He does have a few that are above league average, including 2020 when it was a COVID-shortened season. But beyond that, his full seasons where it's been above league average, there's only 2 of them. So I think that he can be better offensively, and the reason why is because I think he's just going to hit for more average. Here's the averages for Dansby Swanson by year. 230, 240, 250, 270, shortened season. 250, 270.
Walk here.
240, 240. He's a 240 to 250 hitter.
Yeah.
I expect more out of Masyn Winn in that regard, and that's going to help him in the on-base percentage, which is a place that Dansby Swanson really struggles with. So I just think Masyn Winn's a better player. Dansby Swanson's a winner, and I'll give him that. He posts every day. Give him credit for that. He's just not a great baseball player. He's not a guy that I would have paid. I like having Dansby Swanson on Masyn Winn's current contract. I do not like having Dansby Swanson on his current contract with the Chicago Cubs. With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Junk Drawer coming up next here on the show.
Live from the Centene Community Ice Center inside the E&B Granite Studios, this is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. E&B Granite, Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring. Let's open it up. The Junk Drawer with BK and Ferrario.
With Alex and T-Bone on BK, time for the junk drawer. So, Alex, we've started our process of trying to find a new daycare, right?
Yeah.
Little man, we are switching things up. Make a long story short, it's not like a problem or anything. Kara's cousin is going back to full time, and so we are in search now for the first time, really, in Luca's life, of some kind of a child care system. And I don't know how people do it. It's crazy to me. First of all, this stuff is expensive, man.
Let's try having 3 of them in it.
No, I don't think we're going to. I'm going to get the snip before we get there. I don't know how you afford this stuff. It's a separate mortgage for one. Forget 2 to 3. T-Bone, take your time, man.
The good news is once you have multiple, you get discounts.
Sure.
So, like, you have 3 of them, you get discounts.
But that's like buy 2, get 1 free when you go to, like,
Worth it.
the greatest steakhouse in town, right? Yeah, you get the 3rd free, but you already paid $1.25 for each of the first 2 steaks.
Worth it.
So, you enjoy it, but it is what... The tough part for me is not so much, like, you got to pay it. It's cool. We chose to have a kid. We knew what was going to happen as a result of that, right? Like, we got to pay for childcare, and it's expensive. We knew that. The tough part for me, how do you figure out what the good ones are and what the bad ones are? Because there's almost 0 reviews out there. The only thing that's available for you is you get to see all of, like, the previous transgressions that have taken place while they had any of the inquiries into the place. And all of them sound horrible.
Well, you can't read the reviews either, because to me, Google reviews are like Googling if you've got some type of disease and you find out that it's like bone cancer and you're done. Like,
yeah, and the reason why
you can't
is
trust people.
Think about yourself. I'm probably not going to review the place that my kid's going for childcare if I'm like just happy with it. It's a good place. We don't have any issues with it. But if something bad happens, you bet your ass I'm reviewing that like crazy.
And if something bad happens, you bet your ass I'm going to exaggerate it too to make it seem a lot worse than what it was.
Somebody on the text line said, yeah, and everywhere has a waiting list of a year or 2. We've been fortunate in that regard thus far, knock on wood. We haven't run into too many issues with the waiting list stuff, but yeah, it definitely exists out there. The tough part, though, for us is trying to determine what is a good place to go, because I don't want to have to do this process again in a month if we choose a place that's no good. So out of curiosity, how do people choose this?
So I'll just give you our perspective for where we send our girls to Parents' Day Out, which is just a daycare that we go to. We did a walkthrough, and we were in the sense to where there were wait lists for everything. We couldn't get them into anything.
Yeah.
And luckily this place opened up, and so we went in and we walked through, and it was the lady that was in charge, the director of the Parents' Day Out program. She did us a walkthrough, and for us, listening to her explain how everything, and I mean, this isn't trying to be mean, but she was like a drill sergeant. She was very strict. She was very to the point, and she explained everything. And I'm like, okay, I trust this lady with my kid's life.
Sure.
And it's like, okay, well, if I trust you and the program is strategic and I know what you're doing, then it's like I can trust you in this sense, because there were a couple of other ones that we had went to, and we did the walkthrough, and they tried to explain it to us. And I'm like, man, I don't even know if the director of this program knows what's going on. So for us, it was like, okay, this lady's in charge. She is a drill sergeant. She knows exactly what's happening. She doesn't take any nonsense. I'm okay with her being in charge of my child for a few days.
Someone in the text line from the 618 said, guys, my wife just stopped working until our youngest gets into school. Downside for me, your boy is very tired. So last week, we had Luca home all week just because there was a flu outbreak going on. And so me and Kara both continued to work full-time while Luca was at home. So while I was doing the show, she was watching Luca. When I got off of the show, I immediately took over, and she did her work. So we were trying to get, 40-hour work weeks in each, but at separate times. Dude, I don't know how anybody could possibly do that. I know this is different. He's basically saying, hey, my wife stopped working. Yeah. I totally get it if you're somebody that decides to do that. For us, it's not what works for us. Kara enjoys her work, and it is nice for us to be able to have a little bit of, like, downtime, so to speak, where we're not watching Luca all day long. We love him to death. He's the greatest thing that's ever happened to us. But I do think that separation for us is the best thing. But, man, it is expensive to the point where I can imagine for a lot of people it's cheaper to have them stay at home and not pay for daycare than it is to work just literally for your entire check at times to go towards that daycare.
What you described, what you and Kara are doing, it's what Katie and I have done since we've had kids.
Yeah.
She runs her salon business. She works in the evening, and then I work in the daytime. And then when there's hockey games, she doesn't work, and she's home with them. And then when there's no hockey games, she works, and I'm home with them. So
crazy,
we joke all the time that it's like, yeah, we're kind of – we're like single parents because we don't see each other until the weekend or we see each other during the off season. But it's what works for us because we couldn't afford the $1,300 a month that it was to just send a kid to a 5 days a week daycare. And we personally wanted to be around our kids more. We didn't want somebody else to be with them 5 days a week. So it was a lifestyle that we adapted to. Is it fun? Sometimes it's stressful, but more times than not, it's like you look at it and you say, hey, that's the one thing I've learned with parenting. Like, they say sacrifice, and I didn't think I understood the context of sacrifice, but sacrificing is like you don't eat dinner till 9 o'clock.
Sure.
Sacrificing is you don't see your wife probably for 3 nights straight, and then sacrificing is, cleaning up poop in the middle of eating dinner.
Sure. And you do it all with a smile on your face.
You do it with love.
And you live to fight another day. With Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. If you guys have any recommendations on places out in the St. Charles area, feel free to throw them in. We are certainly open to any and all suggestions, or honestly, places that you think definitely
just don't
avoid.
go.
Those are every bit as helpful as the places that you think should be something that we look out for. The avoidance is something that we've got a lot of. Hey, we took our kid here. I can't tell you what to do, but I wouldn't take your kid there. Those have been nice and helpful as well. All right, coming up next, Oli Marmol has a message for Cardinals fans. You buying what he's selling? We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friends out at Ted Drew's famous frozen custard, which is now officially open off of Chippewa for the 2025 season. That's right. I know it's still cold outside. That's not going to stop you from going to get that delicious vanilla custard or whatever flavor you're looking for, because Ted Drew's has tons of them. Whatever you want to mix and match with, concretes, floats, sundaes, all of it is there for you. And, of course, it's that family tradition that is a fourth-generation family-run business that has been around since 1929. Whether you're just going like my daughter loves the Oreo concrete, or maybe you're going to go get one in honor of the blue season, the Blue Note, where you can get vanilla custard mixed with blend of fresh blueberries, smooth lemon cream, and graham crackers. You can get that as a concrete or a sundae. So that's there for you. Building those family traditions is there for you. And the gift shop, which is across the parking lot next to Ted Drew's, where you can shop Ted Drew's in St. Louis apparel. You can also get hats, drinkware, gift cards, all of it over at Ted Drew's famous frozen custard. So make it a plan. I know we'll be going out there tonight because it's a Friday, which means Fridays at Ted Drew's. But make it a tradition with your family and friends. Ted Drew's famous frozen custard. It really is good guys and gals.
BK and Ferrario are broadcasting live from the E&B Granite Studios at the Centene Community Ice Center on 101 ESPN. E&B Granite, Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
With Alex and T-Bone on BK, so Oli Marmol has a message for Cardinals fans. He sat down the other day and was asked a question by Katie Wu of The Athletic on her new podcast that she's doing called Cardinals Territory with Trevor Rosenthal, and asked Oli Marmol, you know, if you could tell fans anything going into this season, what would it be? She left it very open-ended, and this is how Oli Marmol responded. I'm curious your guys' thoughts on this when we hear it on the other side.
Like, when I think about St. Louis, when I think about what the norm is, the difference is this play on youth, right? Like, it is going to be a youthful team. It'll lack some experience to the degree that we've seen in past years. That's different, but that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. And I think what's going to be important, filling up that stadium regardless of what's going on, so that these young players know what it feels like to play in St. Louis. So they understand what it feels like to play in front of, like, Cardinal Nation, right? So if I'm a Burleson, if I'm a Masyn Winn, if I'm a Jordan Walker, if I'm a Herrera, like, you go down that list of young guys, like, I want them to feel, my first time experiencing it was in 2011. They flew Amber and I, prior to having kids, to the World Series, and we sat in the stands, and it was incredible. I mean, it's a drug. Like, you literally sit there in the stands. I remember looking around, and this place was going wild, towels, I mean, it was just nuts. And I remember looking at my wife like, this is all I want. Like, this is what it's about right here. Like, I want to do this. And it makes you strive for that exact thing.
I think there's a million different ways that you could take what he just said. And I understand going in any of those directions. I heard what the Fastlane had to say about this yesterday as they discussed it on their show. Alex, how did you take that? How did it hit for you?
So I understand where he's coming from, because that's the goal, and you want to get back to that. How it hits me is, if you want that environment and if you want that for your players, that's on you, because you're not going to get that in the regular season. Again, I understand what Oli's trying to do. You're trying to kind of make a call to the fan base to say, like, hey, stack this stadium up because we want these young guys to understand what it's like to be a Cardinal. We've gotten away from it. We want to get back to it. Totally. But this Cardinals fan base is frustrated with what has taken place over the last 5 years. This isn't 2011. You know why Oli got that experience and said, this is what I want? Because it was 2011 in the playoffs that had Albert freaking Pujols that was like, oh, damn, this team could win a World Series. That's how you get that environment. So as much as you want that, you're not getting that in May. You're not getting that in June. You're not getting that in August. You know when you're getting that? October. And if you want that, then this team has to perform, and then you, as the manager of the Cardinals, have to make sure that you get to that point, because what he is saying is absolutely 100% true, and you can get there, but it's going to take the playoffs to get there, and you're not going to replicate that in the middle of the season, especially if this team continues their underperformance.
I like what he's saying in that message, and not so much about, like, hey, we want to, crowd the stadium in October, but hey, we want these guys playing in front of 40,000 nightly. And I think there is something to that. When young guys come up, and that is the Cardinal way, or what it was, and the Cardinal way was, I mean, there's a reason they're called the best fans in baseball. It's because there's 40,000 of them packing up a game on a Tuesday night when you're playing the freaking Pittsburgh Pirates. There's something to that. And I think there is a element of, I mean, you mentioned O'Neill, or like the play, he shriveled in the playoffs. Yep. There's also an element from being a guy that plays in the minor leagues or at these big league stadiums that don't have people, like Miami, for example, and then getting to a stadium where there is kind of pressure because there is great fan support. So I do like the message that Oli Marmol is saying, like, hey, I know we're going through a retool, but we need you here. We need you to be packing the stadium because we want these guys to feel some of that pressure when it comes to, like, July, for example, when we got big-time series. The one thing, though, that I have a problem with is I like the message from Oli, but the organization's not saying the same tune.
Yep, that's what I was going to do.
Mo's been saying, like, hey, it's not about wins and losses. It's about figuring out what we have. And then you've got ownership saying, oh, yeah, we know gate revenue is going to be down. And there's no, like, willingness to say, like, hey, we should listen to the fans. They're telling us something by not having this gate revenue here. There's just kind of this mixed messaging. I love what Ollie's saying. I think Ollie's saying the right thing.
As a coach, I get it.
Yeah,
you have to do this.
There's different messaging that has to come from a coach to his players and how he views this thing versus what management is saying, right? They have differing perspectives on what the season is going to be. As a coach, you're looking at the day-to-day. As the general manager, president of baseball operations, you're looking at not just day-to-day, but this year, next year, and 5 years beyond. So I wanted to use that as a jumping off point into an article which was posted earlier today on the St. Louis Business Journal. And it reads as following. According to the Cardinals online MLB ticket marketplace, there are thousands of seats that remain unsold for the 46,000-seat stadium for opening day. A sampling of typical examples around the stadium shows that 118 of the 252 seats in Section 447 are unsold. 61, more than half, of the 111 seats in Section 360 unsold. 62 of the 230 seats in Section 244 and 67-seat section in one sealed bleachers, 185 of the 450 old. They continue. If large numbers of tickets are not sold before the game, it could represent the first home opener crowd not approaching a Cardinal Stadium capacity since 1995 if you exempt the COVID-19 pandemic affected 21 and 20 seasons. According to box score data from Baseball Almanac, a website dedicated to the history of all of that coming from information in the Sports Business Journal today. This would be a wow moment for me. Opening day is a sacred cow here in St. Louis. I understand it if there are a bunch of seats that are available in a random mid-June game. Like last year we did the conversation of, hey, why aren't people showing up? It's not just that the team is bad. We get that, but the team was bad years ago. Historic of box office drops for the St. Louis Cardinals midseason, especially in midweek games, and certainly as kids started going back to school later on in the summer. Alex, what would you make of that? If there are thousands of seats that are unused on opening day,
what I would make of it is the fans sending a message to the Cardinals.
Hey, I apologize. We're going to take a quick break. I want to get your thoughts on that on the other side. It sounds like our audio is starting to go a little bare here. So we're going to continue this conversation on the other side.
Topic. I'm like, whoa.
I really want to hear what you have to say. Coming up on the other side, we'll continue this conversation and hear from you guys as well. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line here on 101 ESPN.
Live from the Centene Community Ice Center inside the E&B Granite Studios, this is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. E&B Granite, Bernie Fedurko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
We're back. I think our audio is good now with Alex and T-Bone on BK. We were just listening to the audio of Oli Marmol, his message to Cardinals fans, which is effectively twofold. One, we need these young guys to experience what it's like playing in big-time environments. And two, that requires Cardinals fans to go to the games. Now, he said in the message, I've got to find a better way to phrase this. So he knows, hey, listen, I understand how this can sound. I'm not trying to call out Cardinals fans here. He basically tried to make that as clear as he could up in the front end of that thing. But I mean, it's kind of hard not to hear that part of the messaging. And so, Alex, we were going to break, and you were about to say something that I know was unbelievably insightful, and I apologize for having to cut you off there, but we needed to get this audio back on track. When you heard that messaging from Oli Marmol, what came to mind for you?
Well, from the messaging from Oli Marmol, it was basically stating, like, look, we've gotten away from having a full crowd. And I think he's also saying with these younger players, like, they need to understand how to play in this type of environment. So I understand the message he's trying to provide. You're just not going to get back to that just by the snap of the fingers. And he even, as you referenced, said, like, look, this isn't coming off of me calling out the fans. So we've got to get back to that. But to what we were talking about, too, of the ticket sales, of people not being willing to come to opening day, that's a message from the fan base. And that's not towards the players. That's not towards the manager. That's towards the front office. I don't even know if it's towards Mozeliak. I think it's towards the DeWitts. Because you have gotten away from what you were from the 80s all the way up until the late, mid-2010s and the teens. Like, I referenced you yesterday, I believe, about the 90s when the team was still bad, but they had Mark McGwire chasing history. People still came. I don't know if that's the case anymore. I think people have just gotten sick of the last 3 years of saying, like, oh, we've got a lot of young players we believe can compete, and we can still compete, and then not backing that up. To me, that especially on opening day, because if there's one day the Cardinals fans are going to go to, it's opening day, because they get to see the Hall of Famers, they get to see the Clydesdales, they get to experience baseball. But that is a massive statement from a fan base that's unwilling to pay the money to go to a game because of what the last few years have been like.
So I would add this. I heard the Fast Lane talking about this yesterday, and one place that I did disagree with them a little bit on, because I think they mostly have our same opinion on all of what we've said thus far. But one place that I disagreed with them a bit is they talked about how you can win back Cardinals fans. Like, if you're good, Cardinals fans will go to the game. And they were talking about, you know, some of the last 20 years, basically, of success that the team has had, and then the fan base supports them accordingly. We went back through this. Yeah, of course the fans are going to support. At basically every 5-year increment, the Cardinals had gone to some kind of a World Series or an NLCS. And, like, most of those teams, the core of them had a World Series winner on them from a Cardinals uniform, not just a guy that had won it from another team like Wilson Contreras, but a guy that had won a World Series and was still a prime, important player on that team here in St. Louis. That's no longer the case. I think the Cardinals are entering uncharted water, uncharted territory, basically in the DeWitt era. The late 90s, you had McGwire. And so that was the pull for people to come back coming out of that strike or the lockout. And then in the early 2000s, you became one of the best teams of your era. And then beyond that, you know, 06, you win it. 11, you win it. 13, you go. Even in 19, you got to the NLCS. But 2015, like, you win 100 games. You got that as the backdrop. Now you are so far removed from any of those teams, and you have so few players that remain from any of those teams. I don't think it's just going to be a situation where if they win 87 games this year, people start to buy in. I think it's going to require them to re-energize the fan base with some goodwill of postseason winning. And this can't just be hey, we've got a young core, they're really fun to watch. Yeah, that works to a degree. That'll avoid them getting to the pitfalls of where, you know, the Royals have been and where it's barren there, or Cincinnati, or some of these other Cleveland, where you've got some of these teams that just don't draw. And there's really nothing the team can do. Tampa, there's nothing the team can do, and it's just never going to work for whatever reason for them to get more than 30,000 fans in the stands. Cardinals aren't going to get there, I don't think. But it might take a while for this to get back to what it was. And I do think that's pretty unfortunate. It's not on the fans. Like, it's the team that did this, right? The team let it deteriorate to the point where the fans don't want to go to the games the way that they once did. So it's not me calling out the fans at all. But there is something that is a little bit lost when St. Louis is not that anymore. It's not the quote-unquote baseball heaven that it once was. And again, this is not me calling out the fans. It's me calling out, like, the team allowed that to happen. And that sucks, dude, because that is what this market is known for. It's why Nolan wanted to be here. It's why Goldie wanted to be here. It's why Matt Holliday wanted to be here, is because you have the ability to play in front of 40,000 fans every night. And now that's gone. And it takes a lot to get that back. You have to earn that as an organization, and it's not just winning 86 games and getting back to the playoffs this year and having a fun young core. No, man. This might take 2, 3, 4, 5 years before they get back to where they have been for a 20-year stretch, and I'm really curious to see what that means for the ownership. Do they then take that and say, okay, because you're not coming to games, we will not invest in the team the way that we did because we relied on that in order to invest in the team? It's a money-making machine to reinvest.
Didn't we hear Bill DeWitt III say that this past year?
We did, and if that becomes the case and the ticket sales are down the way that they appeared to be, I don't know how you get out of it. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy where you don't invest, team's not that good, and now you're not to the same degree, but you're a slightly better version of what the Pirates have been for the last decade.
I was just going to say, you're the Pirates or the Reds.
Even now, the Pirates have Paul Skeens, who they fell into in the draft because they were so bad, and they're investing less money this year in their team than they did last year, which is a strange place to be as an organization. So that's what I'm curious about moving forward. This is way beyond just the 2025 season. This is the next decade. What does this mean for Cardinals baseball?
And then that's why, I think, what you were saying, if it doesn't take just 87 wins, it also takes postseason success. I think it also then takes reinvesting into the team in the offseason, right? Like, a lot of the frustrations with the fan base right now is the fact that they slashed their payroll. And, we've talked about this. What do you do if you were going to be a team that said, hey, we are going to push, actually. We're not going to go through this reset. We're going to push. We're going to try and win the NL Central. And it's tough to figure out what moves the Cardinals could have made to get there. But that is part of the frustration. Even when they were spending like they did last year, there were fans that were saying, hey, they're not spending enough money on the baseball team. And I think that's where they're at. And I think though fans, were in on a reset to an extent, I think a decent amount of the fan base actually kind of likes that there is somewhat of a direction that the Cardinals are trying to convince you on. The other problem that doesn't work with this is Cardinals fans are smart, and they've seen this core already, right? We had this conversation the other day about Jordan Walker and Nolan Gorman, and maybe Cardinals fans are a little too harsh to jump on, hey, Jordan Walker's not a big leaguer. Look at what he did last year. That might be a little too much, but that's kind of how they're viewing it right now. And the front office is telling you after those guys hit potentially rock bottom, or that's who they are, is saying, this is what we're building around. And when we talk about the Cardinal way, we can talk about fundamentals. We can talk about whatever else you think the Cardinal way is. What it really is there's superstars on the team, right? There's the Albert Pujols. There's maybe Matt Holliday wasn't a superstar, but he was a star. I mean, that's for sure. He was a star when he was acquired to come here. Arenado and Goldie were stars when they were acquired to come here. And right now you look at them, maybe Arenado's still a star, but he's starting to really progress. He's going towards that downward climb on the age curve. They don't have the guy. And Masyn Winn could potentially become the face of the franchise. Masyn Winn may not become a star, though. Yep. And I think that's where it is you've got to find the star. You've got to win in October, and you've also got to be able to supplement a team in free agency where we saw the fan base really get frustrated.
And for any of that to happen, you have to have a front office that's always looking to improve. I'm going to go back to the Cam Fowler comment that he had with us a little bit ago when he talked about why he wanted to come to St. Louis. Why? Because he said, I trust Doug Armstrong's plan. Doug Armstrong's always looking for ways to improve. I was looking at this during the commercial break, and because I always go back to that 90s era because they were bad and they were trying to find ways to get back to a winning area. They made the playoffs once from 1990 to 1996. And then the next year, the year after they made the playoffs, they traded for Mark McGwire. That's a team that's always looking to improve. And I don't know if this team's falling into that. This goes all the way back to what we just referenced. At what point do you look at this and say, we've got the complementary pieces, we need to go out there and find a way to improve. And until the ownership is willing to showcase the ability to hey, we'll go out there and we'll swim in the deep end. We'll go out there and go after one of the big superstars that's on the free agent market. Or, you know what, we'll go out there and we'll trade for a young guy that's supposed to be a superstar like they used to do. Until they do that, I don't know how a fan base is going to be willing to accept the Cardinals saying we're going to be back to a competitive window.
That's why it was so big for the Red Sox to get Alex Bregman this offseason. Just as an organization, they needed that. because their fan base had grown to basically be where the Cardinals fan base is right now.
Crochet. I mean, Crochet falls into that to an extent.
To a degree, it's different, though. Like, Crochet's a move that I would expect the Cardinals to make. Like, they traded prospects for a guy that's still on a lower level deal.
I don't think Crochet's a move the Cardinals would make, because it took significant prospect capital to get it done.
Fair enough. They've traded for star guys in the past, and he is a very young player still, and he's not making any money. So that, to me, is different. Like, that is just going out and getting a stud that's still on a lower level deal. Bregman was a $40 million a year investment. That was a big one. And it's still not we're going all the way into the deep end. Like, it's not a Juan Soto contract. It's not what you're going to get next year with Vlad Guerrero Jr., who apparently wants to be on the Red Sox, by the way, according to some reports that have come out in the last couple of days. But it's not one of those types of deals. Kyle Tucker going to get one of those deals. But at least it shows you're willing to go further toward those deals. You know, you're not acting like a small market team in Boston, Massachusetts. The Cardinals have not done that. The closest thing they've gotten to that is, you know, going out and getting Wilson Contreras, or going out and acquiring Dexter Fowler, these 5-year deals that are like middle market money, where it's more adding an extra year than it is getting that huge bloated salary on your books. And I'm not saying they necessarily have to, but I think it would help for Cardinals fans to really believe, okay, when you end up getting this young core that you've talked so much about, you will supplement it with a superstar if you aren't able to develop that guy internally. And that's something that if you're a Cardinals fan right now and you don't believe, I don't really have a retort for you. It's hard for me to give the other angle. They used to do that. They did. They can tell you that they do this with internal improvements and these guys that are coming. No, man, you had Albert Pujols, so that's obviously a huge part of it. You also then went out and acquired Scott Rowland, and you acquired Matt Holliday and then gave him a market value deal. You've done this in the past. You got to get back to doing that in the future. And I think they will, but I get the skepticism, especially with this as the backdrop of opening day might not be sold out, and during the course of the season, it might be their worst attendance in 30 years. That is certainly not something that's going to incentivize them necessarily to go out there and make those moves.
And I don't know if you have the same thought process, but like, they don't sound like their adjustment to the new model of baseball, if you want to call it that, the new financial version of baseball, where Alex Bregman 5 years ago was not getting $40 million on the market. Now he's probably getting 30. He's not getting 40. You know, Soto really inflated the top market. These big market teams have really inflated that. And based on the way the DeWitts are speaking, the way that Mozeliak has spoken at Winter Warm-Up, it doesn't sound like there's going to be this adjustment of, we've got to modernize our spending and get back with the inflation of how this has happened of, hey, we will go out there and give prices that are there at the market. They sound like a team that is going to do what a lot of small market teams do, which is the Pirates, which is say, no, we still are going to look for those $5 million
I don't think they'll go back
deals.
that far.
I don't think as far as the Pirates.
I don't think it's going to be like the rubber band effects to where they're on that lower level. I think it'll look like what it is right now. You'll have a few guys that are making decent money on your team, but you're not going to have many of them. And those like big market deals, the big spenders are going to be like $25 million a year. And that's real money. You're paying for those guys, but it's not what the superstars require of you, and that makes it very difficult to be able to go acquire one of those superstars. And now you get into where the Blues are at, where you're asking your homegrown good players to perform like superstars on good player deals, and then everybody leaves just frustrated because you can't compete with the Dodgers, you can't compete with the Mets, you can't compete with the Braves, the Phillies, or the Padres, because they're all willing to spend on these superstars and you're not. And so you're wondering, left thinking to yourself, why can't we compete with these guys? Well, it's very simple. It's very obvious as to why. And you're missing the piece, maybe even pieces, that will allow you to get to that place. All right, in 15 minutes, we're going to hit the rewind. We got to talk a little bit more about the Four Nations face-off. Cardinal spring training begins this weekend in earnest. Mizzou and Illinois back in action this weekend. And St. Louis City SC back on the field for the first time this year after their owner the other day said in the paper that this is the season where it's not just we want to make the postseason. No. We will make the postseason this year. That is a mandate, according to Carolyn Kendall. So we'll talk about that a little bit coming up in 15 minutes. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. For One's Gotta Go, you give us 4 options. We'll tell you which one's got to go next here on 101 ESPN.
101 ESPN Sports Center.
I'm Jordan Deacon. This Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Coming up this weekend on 101 ESPN, we've got Houston versus Iowa State college basketball happening for you. Saturday tip-off is at 1. And then after that, the Jets are in town taking on the Blues with pregame at 5 and puck drop at 6. Then on Sunday, St. John's versus UConn tip-off is at 11. And then the Colorado Avalanche come into Enterprise Center for pregame at 4 and puck drop at 5. If you missed anything from the show today, like the guys talking with Mike McKenna and Cam Fowler, be sure to visit the podcast page at 101ESPN.com or from your free 101 mobile app. I'm Jordan Deacon. The Sports Center update was driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy. Together we drive. Are you kidding me?
This is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. We're broadcasting live from the E&B Granite Studios at the Centene Community Ice Center. E&B Granite, Bernie Fedorko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring. This is BK and Ferrario. Time now for One's Gotta Go. We offer up the talking points, and you get to pick which one's gotta go on 101 ESPN.
Count that big pen.
All right, 314-399-9646 is the air comfort service X line for One's Gotta Go. You guys give us 4 options. We'll tell you which one's got to go here on BK and Ferrario. This is something that goes away during the football season. We do our NFL weekend look ahead, but then we bring it back around this time of the year.
2 out of 3 on this show says no, but
yeah, we know this is a dictatorship. This is not a democracy here on BK and Ferrario.
Absolutely.
All right, let's
BK
start out with this,
friends.
guys. 3 options here. One's got to go of the 3 ways to build a franchise. 1, payroll or free agent, so spending the money. 2, development, so internal players. Or 3, trades. Which one's got to go for you, Alex? If you had to get rid of one of the 3, what would it be?
Mine would be draft and develop.
Interesting.
How
you getting those trades?
Come on, BK. I almost actually just cussed right there. I forgot we were on the air for a minute. Boy, that would have been 2 for 2 here at Centene. How you're doing that? I don't know how you're doing it, but I think draft and develop is probably the most boring process out of all 3 of them.
Mine would be the money. Mine would be the free agents.
Take
if I
the
had to
most
get rid of one,
exciting
it would
one
be
out of it?
getting rid of the free agents because I think it is the most risky version of this. Now, I think that you can't build a true contender without using all 3. You have to use every possible means to improving your roster. But player development and trades would be the 2 primary ways that I would go about building a team. If I was put in charge, I would also be way over budget, and I would be a disaster. But, yeah, if I had to get rid of one of them, it would be the spending.
Everybody says
and
that.
Free agency.
Everybody says we'd be over, but not with me in charge. We're winning, baby. I would say free agency as well because those other 2 options, typically via trade, you're using the capital that you develop to go out and get somebody. And typically that person, for the most part, still has a decent amount of prime years left in them because they're being traded because somebody's not paying them potentially, or they're unhappy. And then the developed guys, you get them for control, whatever sport it is. Free agency is always the route where, I agree, you got to use all 3, but that's always the route where you end up with less prime years. And it's what the Cardinals have run into with all of their decisions by going with the old guys, like Paul Goldschmidt. Trading for Paul Goldschmidt like 4 years before you actually got him, now that's a hell of a trade. But then acquiring him, signing him to the contract extensions, Cardinals got, 4, 5 years of his prime?
That's the thing. You're not excluded from getting superstars if you trade for them and then re-sign them. That's not considered to be free agency. Yeah. And that's the way that I would go about it. I actually think the Cardinals' old model is exactly the way that I would construct my roster. I would be getting those guys internally, avoiding the bidding wars that take place during free agency, and then re-signing them once they find out how great it is to be a Cardinal. They had the right model. They just got away from it, unfortunately. Or honestly, maybe more clearly, they picked the wrong dudes to do that with. They did it with Jason Hayward, and then they did it with Marcell Ozuna, got it wrong there, and then they ended up with Arenado and Goldie, and they just got the back end of their careers, unfortunately, instead of those prime years. All right, next one up. One's got to go breakfast edition, Alex. Waffles, pancakes, omelets, or oatmeal. Which one's got to go?
Oh, why is this 4th one even in there? Oatmeal. What am I, 90? Oatmeal's never good. I was going to say pancakes because bleep pancakes, waffles all the way. But oatmeal's in here, so that's just That's horse and old people food, so I'm out.
I do not like oatmeal too much as well. My ranking on these would be omelets, waffles, pancakes, oatmeal. Oatmeal's the one that's got to go for me.
Waffles before omelets. That would be my ranking, but pancakes were in the right place.
Oh, really? I would go pancakes 1, omelet
trash.
2, waffle 3, and then oatmeal 4, because oatmeal's got to go.
Trash.
All right, we're all on the same page.
You're 90, though, so I'm surprised oatmeal's not 1.
I started to eat a little bit more. Man, you just can't make that stuff good. It's just so blah.
Makes your bowel movement solid, though.
I like overnight oats, but just the regular plain oatmeal.
That's a horse.
Not for me.
That's a horse right there.
Yeah, look at the beak. One's got to go. If you had to trade one of them on the Blues, Thomas, Parayko, Holloway, or Broberg. This is an interesting one. Who would you go with, Alex? One's got to go if you had to. Thomas, Parayko, Holloway, or Broberg.
Golly. This is like pointing a gun at my children and saying, save one. I don't know. I guess in this situation it would be Holloway. I don't like that, but I would hope I can find another winger elsewhere. I'm not getting rid of Parayko. I'm not getting rid of Thomas. That's a number 1 center and a number 1 defenseman, and I think Broberg's your future number 1 defenseman.
I think I would go Holloway as well. Thomas, number 1 center. Broberg, like, defensemen are so hard to find, and they take so long to develop. I mean, you're seeing he's going through growing pains right now. Parayko, same way. Like, he's finally starting to really hit his peak. I think it is Holloway. I think he's the one I would move.
BK's having a really tough time with this.
I am really struggling with this one.
He's just afraid because he wants to say Thomas.
Well, BK, we know it's Parayko. He always wants to trade the fan favorite from a roster.
It's not Parayko because of what T-Bone said. It's so hard to find that guy. It's why I would have re-signed Petro. Like, I'm not trading away a franchise, especially right-handed defenseman. It's not happening. So that guy would, to me, it's why I think all of the conversation about him leaving is just complete and total nonsense once again. But whatever, it is what it is. I'm not trading away Broberg for all of the reasons that we just listed. He's shown the capacity to be a top pair defenseman in this league already, and he's 23 years old. That's insane. So to me, it's between Thomas and Holloway. Thomas is $8 million a year, so that is one thing that is leaning against him, but he's still really young. I think sometimes we underestimate how young he is still. And Holloway is still new at this. I think Holloway has a chance to be a star, man. Like a legit, real prime.
I'm with you.
First line winger that puts up 30 goals a year. But I think out of these four, because I haven't seen it as much from him, Holloway's probably the one. But that's a really fun one. It's an interesting question. All right, one's got to go Pro Sports All-Star Games edition. NBA, NHL, NFL, or Major League Baseball. Do we all agree it's the NFL's?
Yeah.
Yeah, NFL with an NBA tied for first.
Yeah. I think NBA at least has more recently been good. The NFL's All-Star Game is terrible.
Yeah, neither group tries, so I don't really know why I'm interested in either.
Yeah. I think the only one of those, like if you said like you can get rid of 3 and keep 1, I would keep baseball. It's hard not to try at baseball. And, like, those guys don't give 100%, but they're giving, like, 80 to 90%.
It basically requires the pitchers to try.
Yeah.
That's what baseball is. If the pitchers try, you're going to have a pretty decent game.
Yeah, and so far they've been able to continue to do that. And they go out there and they try and hit, like, 100. Now, I'm sure the franchise are like, no, please, throw it all back. You don't need to show it off. Show it off in game.
I think we're all in agreement there. All right, coming up next, we're going to hit the BK and Ferrario Rewind, giving our final thoughts on the Four Nations face-off. Cardinals spring training opening up this weekend. Mizzou and Illinois both back on the court this weekend as well. And St. Louis City SC opens up their season after their owner said just the other day, this is not just a season where we want to make the playoffs. This is a season where we will make the playoffs. The mandate has been stated. Are they going to be able to follow up on that? We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
Live from the Centene Community Ice Center inside the E&B Granite Studios, this is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. E&B Granite, Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring. Let's run it back with a daily rewind on BK and Ferrario. Brought to you by Gloria Lou, your home sold guaranteed realty. Selling your home begins at GloriaHasTheBuyers.com.
Anything from today's show, be sure to check it out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, and the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Schaefer Door Company.
While you're over there, you can check out the 101 ESPN app, which is presented by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. Earlier today, we talked to Mike McKenna, former NHL goalie, about what he saw, what stood out to him about Jordan Binnington's performance last night. Cam Fowler, Blues defenseman, also stopped by the show as we're broadcasting live at the E&B Granite Studios at the Centene Community Ice Center, where the Blues took the ice earlier today for morning skate. Fowler was great. Talked to us about his experience playing for Team USA, what it was like to watch Benner and Parayko last night on the Canada side of things. Said it was a little conflicted. You got the U.S. roots, but then you've got two teammates that are over on the Canadian side. I can only speak for myself. My wife was especially rooting for Team Canada, not out of lack of pride for the country or anything, but she wanted to see Parayko and Binnington win it. So there were a lot of conflicted people, I would imagine, in the St. Louis area. And, Alex, let's finish our thoughts on the Four Nation face-off now here during the BK and Ferrario Rewind. It was great exposure for a sport that deserves it. There are so many great players. Sportsnet just put this out. Canada's victory last night in the Four Nation face-off final was the second most watched hockey game ever on Sportsnet. It averaged more than 5.5 million viewers. So it was a home run in every possible way. I thought ESPN did a great job covering it yesterday. They had all of their studio shows even talking about hockey. That's not something you see a whole lot of. Even if you hate the way that they covered it, they were covering it, and that's all you can ask for as a sport. What'd you make of it this year, and what do you think the future of tournaments like this in non-Olympic years looks like for the NHL?
I thought it was an incredible tournament. I mean, this was incredible for the game of hockey, and frankly, I'm excited to see what's next because there's going to be so much anticipation now for the Olympics next year when you'll have a fully healthy USA team, you hope, a fully healthy Canada team, and then hopefully you'll have Russia being involved to where you have all of the powerhouses in the NHL and the best players playing in this tournament. It's great for the sport, and I'm excited to see kind of as it builds. I'm in agreement with Mike and what we've talked about today. You can't let this thing get watered down to where every single year you have to do this because you're going to lose the gravitas to this type of environment. But if you do it right, the every other year that you're going to implement this best-on-best tournament, people are always going to gravitate back towards it.
Yeah, I would say my one warning for the NHL, don't do with this what you did with the Stadium Series, where it eventually gets watered down and it is no longer this unique thing. It is no longer something that people look forward to. It's just another game every year. I would say, hey, every 4 years, in a 4-year cycle, you have one Olympics and one of these tournaments, whatever form you decide for that to take, and you do it like a biannual basis. And in between, you do some kind of all-star event. I don't know what that looks like. It doesn't have to be specifically an all-star game, but some kind of an all-star event in those off years. I think that's the way for them to go. T-Bone, Cardinal spring training opens up this weekend with the games. They're on the field tomorrow, taking on, I believe it's the Marlins. Yeah. It's expected to be Eric Fetty and Matthew Liberatore as the two kind of piggyback pitchers for the Cardinals. Who's the guy you're most looking forward to seeing at spring training during the games this weekend?
I'll be curious. At some point, I think you're going to see Gordon Graceffo, Zach Thompson get some innings this weekend. I think those guys are in make-or-break years. Like we talked yesterday about, hey, this is the make-or-break season for Jordan Walker, for Nolan Gorman. It's for those pitchers, man. Zach Thompson's been in the organization a while. Gordon Graceffo's been in the organization for a while, and it feels like they've stalled out and haven't found roles. I'll be curious to see them. And then I'm sure we're going to see Walker at some point this weekend. I mean, we talked about his changes. He sounds like a guy that's making improvements. You're not going to learn a lot from 2 games over the weekend, but he's a guy that I'm really monitoring during spring training this year.
Tomorrow, St. Louis City SC back in action. They are opening up their season on the road against the Colorado Rapids, I believe it is. I got that right. Boom, rocked it. 7:30 start for that one, once again on Apple TV. Alex, yesterday in a piece with Ben Hockman, Carolyn Kindle said, hey, this is not a season where we hope to make the playoffs. This is a season where we will make the postseason. That is the expectation going into the year. What's your level of excitement for this one?
Probably put it like a 5. I'm kind of right in between right now. I'm more curious and excited because to say that, you got to have at least a pretty good feel about your team believing that they can get there. Or maybe you're putting pressure on them.
This is in St. Louis. I said it was in Colorado.
I thought it was here.
This is really awkward.
I'm just going to let you go, man.
All of the soccer zealots out there are going to be so mad at me. I knew this because I had heard about the weather forecast and how cold it was going to be. That's on me. I apologize, Alex. Go ahead.
You are not a St. Louis.
So your level of excitement's up.
Well, now it's a 10. I didn't know it was in St. Louis. No, it's still right around a 5.
I apologize.
I'm more curious and excited with this team. To say that, you got to have some expectations. This team was not good defensively last year, and they weren't good offensively last year, and they've got a lot of new faces on their team. But the part that I think I'm more curious and excited is you just had a player that wanted to be traded away. Why is that? So I'll be interested.
To me, this is a team where it's like, hey, man, you did what the Cardinals refused to do. You overhauled everything. You got a new coach. You got a bunch of new players. You were active in the transfer market. I want to see what it looks like. I don't know if it's going to be good or bad. It could go the other direction this year, but I am curious. I will be watching the game. I will not be going down there because it's too damn cold outside. I am planning to get to a game soon with Luka. It's something that I want to do. But, yeah, I will not be going to this one. All right, Mizzou back in action this weekend as well. They're taking on Arkansas tomorrow. It is on the road. This is a really tough game. This might be the toughest game for Mizzou to win the rest of the way.
Brandon.
No, I'm serious. Arkansas is a tough team to play at their home stadium. It is a legitimate rivalry in basketball. It's not in football, but in basketball it absolutely is. Arkansas at home is not an easy team to go up against. Alabama really struggled there. They ended up winning that game by just a few points. So if Mizzou's going to lose a game down the stretch, I think it's this one. I think they will win, but I think this is going to be decided by a few points. It will be tight throughout. Illinois, this is a make-or-break game for them, man. If they want to get this thing back on track, this is the kind of game on Saturday against Duke on a neutral site, Madison Square Garden type of a performance. You can get this thing going back in the right trajectory. You can get T-Bone back on their side, but it requires a win against Duke this week, and this is really one of their last shots to be able to do so.
Look, man, they got a brutal stretch. Like, Duke's powerhouse, they're not beating them.
Duke?
Never
heard of them.
They're pretty good.
They're amazing.
But Illinois' schedule's brutal the rest of the way. They've only got one more unranked opponent. I don't think they're turning this around, guys. We're at the point where, sure, they beat Duke. Maybe I'll sing a different tune on Monday, but I don't see them turning this around. As Kerry was singing when he walked into the studio the other day, they're free falling.
Great song.
Duke,
name the movie.
Kerry, great voice, by the way.
Duke has not played many teams the quality of Illinois this year.
We stink.
The ACC is terrible. Genuinely terrible. I think Duke is legitimately really good, but there could be a ramp up in terms of the competition that they're going up against. Last good team that Duke played against was Clemson. They ended up losing that game. So I will actually be curious to see how Illinois stacks up against them. I think Duke wins, but this is a game that maybe you give Illinois a little bit better of a shot in than you otherwise would because of the level of competition that Duke's been playing in recent weeks. With Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this weekend. There's plenty of sports on. It's much better than last weekend in that regard. It wasn't a whole lot other than the Four Nations face-off. We will break it all down for you guys on Monday at 11 a.m. Thanks to Jordan Deacon, who did a fantastic job for us back in the studio today. Enjoy your weekend. The Fast Lane's coming up next year on 101 ESPN.